In the shadowed halls of Blackthorn Manor, a scream shatters the night, and Hercule Poirot steps into a deadly game of deception. A cryptic letter lures the legendary detective to a secluded Devon estate, where Lady Eleanor Blackthorn fears a poisoner stalks her family's legacy. As guests seek hiding secrets gather for a fateful weekend, a maid collapses, a vial of rare toxin in her hand. Was it a mistake, or a chilling warning? Poirot's razor-sharp mind unravels a web of greed, revenge, and betrayal, where locked rooms hide deadly darts. Masquerade balls conceal thieves, and a stolen ledger points to a criminal mastermind, only as the broker, who among the aloof son, the ambitious niece, the charming journalist, or the nervous solicitor, is the traitor. As poison strikes again and a gunshot echoes, Poirot risks everything to expose the truth. Will he unmask the broker before the manor claims another victim, or will this web of lies ensnare even him? Dive into a tale of suspense, where every clue is a trap, and trust is a luxury no one can afford. Chapter 1: The Invitation to Blackthorn Manor. The autumn wind carried a chill that seemed to whisper secrets as it rustled. Through the gnarled oaks lining the road to Blackthorn Manor, Hercule Poirot, seated in the back of a polished Bentley, adjusted his meticulously pressed lapels, and gazed out at the rolling Devon hills. His gloved fingers tapped lightly on the silver handle of his cane, a rhythm born of restless anticipation. The letter, now tucked securely in his breast pocket, had arrived at his London flat 3 days prior, its elegant script and urgent tone igniting his curiosity. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn, a name he vaguely recalled from society pages, had requested his presence at her estate for a weekend gathering. The missive hinted at a shadow looming over her family, a secret, she wrote, that threatened to unravel. Their legacy, Poirot, never one to resist a puzzle, had accepted without hesitation. The car slowed as it approached the manor's wrought iron gates, their intricate filigree half hidden by creeping ivy. The driver, a taciturn man with a face like weathered granite, muttered something about the estate's isolation before opening the gate. Poirot noted the man's unease, filing it away as the first thread in what he sensed would be a complex tapestry of motives and deceptions. The driveway wound through a maze of ancient yews, their twisted branches casting long shadows across the gravel. At last, the manor emerged, a sprawling Georgian edifice of weathered stone, its windows glowing with the amber light of chandeliers. Yet, despite its grandeur, there was something unsettling about the place, as if the very walls held their breath. Poirot stepped out, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel, and was greeted by a butler whose stiff posture and hollow eyes suggested a man accustomed to discretion. "Monsieur Poirot," the butler intoned, bowing slightly. "Lady Blackthorn awaits you in the drawing-room." Poirot followed, his keen eyes sweeping the entrance hall. Marble floors gleamed under a vaulted ceiling adorned with frescoes of cherubs and vines. But the air carried a faint mustiness, as if the house had been sealed too long against the world. Portraits lined the walls, their subjects staring down, with expressions ranging from haughty to haunted. One, a stern man in a naval uniform, bore the nameplate, Lord Archibald Blackthorn, Eleanor's late husband, Poirot recalled, a shipping magnate, whose death had left her vast wealth and influence. The drawing-room was a study in opulence, velvet drapes in deep burgundy, a roaring fire casting flickering shadows on gilded furniture, and a crystal decanter glinting on a sideboard. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn stood by the fireplace, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her emerald gown catching the light. She was a woman of perhaps 60, her sharp blue eyes betraying a mind as formidable as her reputation. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice smooth but edged with tension, "your presence does me great honor. I trust your journey was pleasant." "Most agreeable, Madame Poirot," replied, bowing, "though I confess, your letter piqued my curiosity. You spoke of a threat to your family's legacy. Might I know more?" Eleanor's smile was tight, her gaze flickering to the other guests assembled in the room. "All in good time," she said. "First, allow me to introduce my companions." She gestured to a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 30s, whose dark hair and brooding expression suggested a temperament ill-suited to pleasantries. "My son, Reginald Blackthorn." Reginald gave a curt nod, his eyes narrowing as if sizing. Poirot up. Next was a young woman with auburn curls and a restless energy, her fingers twisting a silk handkerchief. "My niece, Clara Pembroke," Eleanor continued. Clara offered a fleeting smile, her green eyes darting to the window. A third figure, a man with a journalist's easy charm and a notebook tucked under his arm, stepped forward. "Victor Hale," he said, extending a hand. "Delighted to meet the famous detective." His grin was disarming, but Poirot noted the calculating glint in his hazel eyes. Finally, a nervous, bespectacled man in a tweed suit shuffled forward. "Mr. Grayson, our family solicitor," Eleanor said. Grayson mumbled a greeting, his hands trembling as he adjusted his glasses. The introductions were interrupted by the arrival of dinner, announced by the butler with a solemn gong. The dining room was no less grand, its long mahogany table set with silver and porcelain. As the guests took their seats, Poirot observed their interactions with the precision of a watchmaker. Reginald sat rigidly, his jaw tight as he exchanged clipped words with his mother. Clara toyed with her wineglass, her gaze flitting between Victor and the door. Victor, meanwhile, peppered Eleanor with questions about her late husband's business, his tone light but probing. Grayson, seated beside Poirot, spilled a drop of soup on his tie and muttered an apology, his unease palpable. The meal, roast pheasant, glazed carrots, and a velvety claret, was exquisite. Yet the atmosphere was anything but convivial. Eleanor's earlier warmth had given way to a strained vigilance, her eyes scanning the table as if expecting betrayal. "Monsieur Poirot," she said at length, setting down her fork, "I invited you here because I fear for my life." A hush fell over the table, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Reginald snorted, but Clara's hand froze mid-motion, and Victor's pen paused above his notebook. Grayson's spoon clattered against his bowl. "I have reason to believe," Eleanor continued, "that someone in this house intends to poison me." The word poison hung in the air like a guillotine's blade. Poirot leaned forward, his mustache twitching slightly. "A grave accusation, madame. Have you evidence of this intent?" Eleanor's lips thinned. "2 weeks ago, my tea tasted bitter. I discarded it and suffered no harm, but I am certain it was tampered with. And yesterday, a vial of arsenic was found missing from my private collection, a keepsake from my husband's travels, locked in my study." Reginald slammed his glass down. "This is absurd, mother. You're seeing ghosts. Who would want you dead?" "Perhaps someone who covets my fortune," Eleanor said coolly, her eyes locking with his. "Or someone who knows too much about our family's past." Clara's face paled, and Victor scribbled furiously. Grayson coughed, his napkin pressed to his mouth. Poirot, however, remained composed, his mind already weaving connections. "Madame," he said, "I shall require access to this study, and a list of all who knew of the vial's existence." Before Eleanor could respond, a piercing scream shattered the tension. The guests froze, their eyes darting to the doorway. The butler burst in, his face ashen. "It's Mary, Milady's maid. She's collapsed in the kitchen." Poirot was on his feet in an instant, his cane tapping as he followed the butler. The kitchen was a chaos of overturned pots and startled staff. Mary, a young woman with a freckled face, lay sprawled on the flagstones, her breathing shallow. In her clenched fist was a small glass vial, its label marked with a skull and crossbones. Poirot knelt beside her, his gloved fingers gently prying the vial free. "Arsenic," he murmured, his eyes narrowing. "But not enough to kill, I think." Eleanor, who had followed, gasped. "That's from my collection." Poirot stood, his gaze sweeping the gathered guests, who had crowded into the doorway. "This is no accident," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Someone in this house has spun a web of betrayal, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall unravel it." The maid was carried to her room, where a doctor was summoned. Poirot examined the vial, noting its wax seal was unbroken save for a tiny puncture, suggesting careful tampering. He questioned the kitchen staff, learning that Mary had been sipping from a glass meant for Eleanor's after-dinner tea. The mistake had saved Eleanor, but endangered an innocent. Poirot's mind raced greed, revenge, or something deeper. The guests' reactions offered clues. Reginald's clenched fists, Clara's trembling lips, Victor's too calm demeanor, Grayson's sweat-beaded brow. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. Returning to the dining room, Poirot announced his plan. "Tomorrow, at breakfast, I shall set a small test," he said, his eyes glinting. "A trap, if you will, to see who among us flinches. I advise you all to sleep well for the guilty. Rest will be elusive." As the guests dispersed, Poirot lingered by the fire, his thoughts as precise as the ticking of a clock. The manor was a stage, its players hiding their true roles. He retrieved the letter from his pocket, rereading Eleanor's words. "A secret threatens to unravel our legacy." What secret, he wondered, could drive someone to such desperate measures? The vial, the scream, the poisoned tea-all were threads in a tapestry he would soon decipher. For now, he was satisfied. He had met the players, identified the weapon, and set the stage for the next act. The game, as he often said, was afoot. Poirot retired to his room, a spacious chamber with a four-poster bed and heavy drapes. He lit a single candle, preferring its soft glow to the electric lamps, and sat at a writing desk to jot notes in his precise handwriting. The suspects: Eleanor, the potential victim with a guarded past; Reginald, the resentful heir; Clara, the nervous niece with secrets in her eyes; Victor, the journalist whose charm masked ambition; Grayson, the solicitor whose nerves betrayed him. The maid's survival was a stroke of luck, but the poisoner's intent was clear. Poirot's trap at breakfast would reveal more, perhaps a glance, a hesitation, a lie too hastily told. As he extinguished the candle, the manor's silence pressed against him, broken only by the distant howl of the wind. Blackthorn Manor was a house of secrets, and Poirot was its unraveler. Tomorrow, he would tighten the net, and the first thread of truth would emerge. For now, he closed his eyes, content that the puzzle had begun to take shape, its edges sharp and promising. Chapter 2. The poisoned chalice. The morning after the chilling scream that had pierced the night at Blackthorn Manor, a heavy fog clung to the Devon hills, shrouding the estate in a veil of unease. Hercule Poirot stood by the tall, arched window of the manor's drawing room, his sharp eyes scanning the mist-draped gardens below. His neatly trimmed mustache twitched slightly as he adjusted his bow tie, a ritual that grounded him amidst the chaos of a burgeoning mystery. The unconscious maid, Mary Whitlock, had been rushed to the local hospital in the early hours, her condition stable but precarious. The vial of poison found clutched in her hand, slender glass tube, etched with a delicate floral pattern, had been identified as belonging to Lady Eleanor Blackthorn's private collection, a detail that sent ripples of suspicion through the household. Poirot turned from the window, his polished shoes clicking softly against the polished oak floor. The drawing room was a study in opulence. Crimson velvet drapes, a chandelier dripping with crystal, and a grand fireplace where embers still glowed from the previous night's blaze. Yet, the grandeur felt hollow, tainted by the shadow of attempted murder. Poirot's mind was already at work, piecing together the fragments of the evening Eleanor's cryptic fear of poisoning, the maid's collapse, and the uneasy glances exchanged among the guests. He had resolved to uncover the truth, and now, with the household awake and the fog lifting, he began his investigation in earnest. The maid's condition. Poirot's first stop was the kitchen, where the staff bustled nervously, their whispers ceasing the moment he entered. The head cook, Mrs. Baxter, a stout woman with flour-dusted hands, stood by the stove, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, wiping her hands on her apron, "poor Mary's still in hospital. They say she pulled through, but it's a miracle she's alive." "Indeed, Madame Baxter," Poirot replied, his voice calm but probing. "And what can you tell me of this poison? The vial, it is most distinctive, Nan." Mrs. Baxter hesitated, her eyes darting to the other servants, a young scullery maid and a footman, both avoiding her gaze. "It's one of Lady Eleanor's, sir. She keeps a collection of old apothecary bottles in her study. Keepsakes, she calls them. But we never thought, well, that they'd be used for something so wicked." Poirot nodded, his fingers brushing the edge of his pocket watch. "And who has access to this study?" Only Lady Eleanor and Mr. Grayson, the solicitor, sir. And Mary, of course, when she cleans. But she's a good girl, Mary is. She'd never mercy Madame Baxter, Poirot interrupted gently. I shall speak with the others. Please, continue your work. Leaving the kitchen, Poirot made his way to the hospital, a modest stone building on the edge of the village. Dr. Hargrove, a wiry man with spectacles perched on his nose, greeted him in the sterile corridor. The poison was a rare alkaloid, Monsieur Poirot, the doctor explained, leading him to a small office. Derived from a South American plant, deadly in high doses, but survivable in the amount Mary ingested. She's conscious now, but weak. May I see her? Poirot asked. Dr. Hargrove nodded, guiding Poirot to a private room where Mary lay, her face pale against the crisp white sheets. Her eyes fluttered open as Poirot approached, and she managed a weak smile. Monsieur, I didn't mean no harm. Of course, Mademoiselle Whitlock, Poirot said, pulling a chair beside her bed. Tell me, what do you recall of last night? Mary's voice trembled. I was serving the wine at dinner, Lady Eleanor's glass. I must have picked it up by mistake. I took a sip, just to check it wasn't corked, like she taught me. Then, everything went blurry. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. And this vial, found in your hand, you know how it came to be there? Mary shook her head, tears welling. No, sir, I swear I don't. I'd never touch her ladyship's things. Poirot patted her hand gently. Rest now, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful. As he left the hospital, Poirot's mind churned. The poison was meant for Eleanor, he was certain. The maid's accidental sip had thwarted the plan. But the vial's presence in her hand suggested a deliberate attempt to frame Hercule, to distract from the true culprit. The question was, who among the guests had the motive and opportunity? The interviews begin back at Blackthorn Manor. Poirot gathered the guests in the library, a cavernous room lined with leather-bound books and dominated by a mahogany table. The morning light filtered through stained glass windows, casting colorful shadows across the faces of Reginald Blackthorn, Clara Whitby, Victor Hale, and Mr. Grayson. Eleanor herself sat at the head of the table, her silver hair immaculate despite the strain in her eyes. Monsieur Poirot, Eleanor began, her voice steady but laced with fear. Have you found who tried to harm my Mary? Not yet, madame, Poirot replied, pacing slowly before the group, but I shall. First, I must ask each of you to account for your movements last night, from dinner until the scream was heard. Reginald, Eleanor's son, leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes glinting with impatience. A man in his early 30s, he had the sharp features of his mother, but none of her warmth. This is absurd, he said, lighting a cigarette. I was in the billiard room after dinner, playing around with Victor. Ask him. Victor Hale, the journalist, nodded, though his charming smile seemed strained. That's right, Reginald. And I played until about 10. Then I went to my room to write some notes. Poirot's gaze shifted to Clara, Eleanor's niece, whose auburn hair was pulled into a tight bun. She clasped her hands tightly, her knuckles white. I was in the conservatory, she said softly. I like to walk there at night. The flowers, they calm me. And you, Monsieur Grayson? Poirot asked, turning to the solicitor, a nervous man whose spectacles kept slipping down his nose. I was in my room, reviewing documents, Grayson stammered. Lady Eleanor asked me to look over some estate papers. Poirot's mustache twitched. Most interesting. And yet the vial of poison, it comes from Madame Eleanor's study, where only you and the maid have regular access. Monsieur Grayson. Grayson paled, his hands fumbling with his tie. I swear, I didn't touch it. I was in my room all evening. Eleanor raised a hand, silencing the room. Enough. Monsieur Poirot, I trust you to find the truth. Someone in this house wishes me harm, and I will not rest until they are exposed. Poirot bowed slightly. Rest assured, madame, the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot are at your service. The hidden note after the interviews, Poirot returned to the scene of the crime, the dining room, where the maid had collapsed. The long oak table was still set with crystal goblets and silver cutlery, a silent witness to the previous night's drama. Poirot examined the chair where Eleanor had sat, noting the position of her wineglass, now removed for analysis. He crouched beside the table, his eyes scanning the floor, and there, caught in the fringe of the Persian rug, he found it, a folded scrap of paper, no larger than a calling card. Unfolding it carefully, Poirot read the scrawled message: "Beware the traitor." In the inner circle, the handwriting was hurried, the ink smudged, but the warning was clear. Someone had known of the plot or been part of it. Poirot tucked the note into his pocket, his mind racing. The phrase inner circle suggested someone close to Eleanor, perhaps a family member or a trusted confidant. But who? He moved to Eleanor's study, a small room off the main hall, its walls lined with glass cases displaying her collection of apothecary bottles. Each vial gleamed in the morning light, their labels faded but legible: belladonna, arsenic, and the rare alkaloid identified by Dr. Hargrove. Poirot examined the case, noting a faint smudge on the glass near the alkaloid's vial. A fingerprint. Perhaps he made a mental note to have it dusted later. As he left the study, he encountered Clara, who was hovering near the staircase, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I heard you were in the study. Did you find anything?" Poirot studied her carefully, noting the way her eyes darted to the study door. "Perhaps, Mademoiselle Whitby. Tell me, these walks of yours in the conservatory, do they often take you past the study?" Clara flushed, her hands twisting in her skirt. "Sometimes. I like the quiet of the house at night." "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp. "And did you see anyone near the study last night?" "No," she said quickly, too quickly. "I was alone." Poirot nodded, letting the silence linger. Clara excused herself, hurrying upstairs. And Poirot made another mental note. Clara's walks warranted closer scrutiny. Suspicions and alibis over luncheon. The atmosphere in the dining room was thick with tension. Reginald picked at his food, his cigarette smoldering in an ashtray. Victor, ever the charmer, attempted to lighten the mood with anecdotes about his travels, but his laughter rang hollow. Grayson, meanwhile, spilled soup on his tie, his hands shaking. Eleanor presided over the meal with icy composure, though her eyes flicked to Poirot often, as if seeking reassurance. After the meal, Poirot cornered Victor in the hallway. "Monsieur Hale," he said, "you're a journalist, Nan. Tell me, what brings you to Blackthorn Manor? A story, perhaps." Victor's smile faltered. "Just a social visit, Monsieur Poirot. Lady Eleanor invited me. I've written about her charity work before, thought I'd catch up." "And yet," Poirot said, tilting his head, "you seem most curious about her past. Her husband's business, perhaps. The shipping empire." Victor's eyes narrowed, but he recovered quickly. "A journalist is always curious. But I assure you, I'm here as a guest, nothing more." Poirot let him go, unconvinced. Victor's charm was a mask, and Poirot suspected he was digging for more than a puff piece on Eleanor's philanthropy. The man's notebook, glimpsed briefly during their billiard game, was filled with shorthand notes that might hold clues. Next, Poirot sought out Reginald, finding him in the billiard room, racking balls with unnecessary force. "Monsieur Blackthorn," Poirot said, "you seem displeased with your mother's wealth. Is it true you stand to inherit little?" Reginald snorted, chalking his cue. "Mother's always been tight-fisted. Says I'm reckless with money. She's probably right, but I don't need her fortune. I've got my own ventures. And these ventures," Poirot pressed, "they require no assistance from your mother's estate." Reginald's jaw tightened. "What are you implying, Poirot? That I'd poison my own mother for a few pounds?" "Not at all," Poirot said smoothly. "But motives, they are like shadows sometimes. They hide in plain sight." Reginald slammed the cue down and stormed out, leaving Poirot alone, with a clatter of billiard balls. The man's temper was a liability, but was it a motive? The trap at breakfast that evening, Poirot devised a plan to test the household. He confided in Eleanor, explaining his intention to set a trap at breakfast the following morning. "Madame," he said, "we shall announce that I have found a clewer, definitive piece of evidence, pointing to the poisoner. The guilty party. They will react, Nan. Eleanor nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. Do what you must, Monsieur Poirot. I trust you. At breakfast, the guests gathered around the table, the air thick with anticipation. Poirot stood, his presence commanding despite his small stature. Madame et messieurs, he began. Last night, I discovered a clue that brings us closer to the poisoner. It is a matter of time before the truth is revealed. He watched their faces closely. Reginald's eyes narrowed, his fork pausing mid-air. Clara gripped her teacup tightly, her knuckles white. Victor leaned forward, his smile fixed but his eyes darting. Grayson dropped his napkin, fumbling to retrieve it. Yet, no one spoke, and no one fled. The trap, it seemed, had failed, or had it? As the meal ended, Poirot lingered, observing the guests as they dispersed. He had expected a reaction, a slip, but the silence was telling in its own way. The poisoner was cautious, calculating. Poirot's mind returned to the note, traitor in the inner circle. Greed or revenge, he mused, were the most likely motives. Greed for Eleanor's wealth, or revenge for some hidden wrong. The ledger, mentioned in passing by Victor, might hold the key. But it remained elusive for now. A moment of reflection as the day drew to a close. Poirot retired to the terrace, a glass of tisane in hand. The fog had lifted, revealing the rolling hills beyond the manor. He sipped the herbal tea, letting his thoughts settle. The maid's poisoning was a misstep, a plan gone awry. The vial in her hand was a clumsy attempt to shift blame, but it confirmed the poisoner's access to Eleanor's study. Reginald's disdain, Clara's secrecy, Victor's curiosity, and Grayson's nerves all were threads in a tangled web. The note, however, was the key. It spoke of betrayal, of intimacy, of a wound close to the heart. Poirot set his glass down, his eyes gleaming with determination. Hercule Poirot does not fail, he murmured to himself. The truth, it will be found, and the poisoner, they will be unmasked. He rose, ready to plan his next move. The breakfast trap had revealed little, but the game was far from over. Tomorrow, he would shadow Clara's walks, search Victor's room, and press Grayson for the truth about the estate papers. The web of betrayal was tightening, and Poirot was satisfied that he had identified the key players. The motive, he believed, was narrowing to greed or revenge, and with each step, he was closer to unraveling the mystery of Blackthorn Manor. Chapter 3. The Locked Room. Rithel the morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Blackthorn Manor, casting long shadows across the dining room, where the guests gathered for breakfast. Hercule Poirot sat at the head of the table, his sharp, gray eyes scanning each face with the precision of a jeweler inspecting a gem. The air was thick with unease, the events of the previous night a scream, a poisoned maid, and a cryptic note hanging over the room like a storm cloud. Poirot had planned a subtle trap to provoke a reaction from the guilty party, but as the meal progressed, no one betrayed themselves. The clink of silverware and the murmur of strained pleasantries filled the silence. But Poirot's mind was elsewhere, piecing together the puzzle of Blackthorn Manor. Lady Eleanor, Blackthorn, regal, yet pale, presided over the table with a forced smile. Her son Reginald slouched in his chair, his sullen expression barely masking his disdain for the gathering. Clara, Eleanor's niece, sipped her tea with calculated poise, her eyes darting occasionally to the journalist, Victor Hale, who seemed more interested in his notebook than his plate. Mr. Grayson, the family solicitor, fidgeted with his napkin, his nervous glances betraying a man unaccustomed to scrutiny. The maid, Mary, was absent, recovering in her quarters under the care of the local doctor. Her survival, a stroke of luck that Poirot intended to exploit. Poirot's trap had been simple. He had let slip during the previous evening's chaos that he suspected the poisoner had left a clue in the dining room. He had hoped to catch someone searching for it in the night. But his discreet vigil from the library window had yielded nothing. The lack of action intrigued him. Either the culprit was too clever to take the bait, or they were confident their tracks were covered. As the butler served a fresh pot of coffee, Poirot leaned back, stroking his mustache, his mind turning to the maid's poisoning. The vial, the note, the mistaken glass, it all pointed to a calculated act, but one that had misfired. Why? Before he could pursue the thought, a piercing cry shattered the morning calm. It came from upstairs, sharp and desperate. The guests froze, forks suspended mid-air. Poirot was on his feet in an instant, his small frame moving with surprising agility as he led the charge up the grand staircase. The cry had come from Reginald's room, and as they reached the landing, Clara pounded on the locked door, calling her cousin's name. There was no response, only a faint groan. "Break it down," Victor shouted, his journalistic instincts kicking in as he shoved his shoulder against the heavy oak. The butler, a burly man named Jenkins, joined him, and with a splintering crash, the door gave way. Inside, Reginald lay sprawled on the floor, his face flushed and his breathing shallow. His eyes fluttered, delirious, as he muttered incoherently. A glass of water lay shattered beside him, its contents pooling on the Persian rug. Poirot knelt beside Reginald, his fingers deftly checking the young man's pulse. "He lives," he announced, his voice calm but commanding. "But he has been poisoned, I fear. The symptoms sweating, disorientation are familiar. Fetch the doctor at once." Jenkins bolted from the room, while Eleanor clutched the doorframe, her face ashen. "My son," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Who would do this?" Eyes narrowed as he surveyed the room. The windows were bolted shut, the curtains undisturbed. A single key lay on the bedside table, glinting in the morning light. The door, now broken, had been locked from the inside, a detail that piqued Poirot's curiosity. A locked room, a poisoned victim, and no apparent means of entry. This was a puzzle worthy of his intellect, Madame Poirot said, turning to Eleanor. "We must ensure no one leaves this house until the doctor arrives. And you," he pointed to Victor, who was scribbling furiously in his notebook, "cease your writing and assist me. We must examine this room before it is disturbed." Victor hesitated, then pocketed his notebook with a reluctant nod. Clara knelt beside Reginald, her hands trembling as she brushed his hair from his forehead. Grayson hovered near the doorway, wringing his hands. "This is madness," he muttered. "First Mary, now Reginald. What's next?" Poirot ignored the solicitor's panic, his attention fixed on the room's details. The bed was unmade, suggesting Reginald had risen in the night. A half-empty decanter of brandy sat on a side table, its stopper loose. Poirot sniffed the liquid cautiously, detecting no obvious odor of poison, but he made a mental note to have it tested. The fireplace was cold, its ashes undisturbed. The only anomaly was a small, almost imperceptible hole in the window frame, no larger than a pinprick, near the bottom of one pane. "Curio," Poirot murmured, running his finger along the frame. He turned to the group, his voice sharp. "No one is to touch this room until I say otherwise. Monsieur Victor, you will guard the door. Madame Clara, assist your aunt to the drawing-room. Monsieur Grayson, fetch me a magnifying glass from the study." The guests obeyed, though Clara cast a lingering glance at Reginald as she led Eleanor away. Victor took his post with a grudging air, while Grayson scurried off, muttering under his breath. Poirot knelt by the window, examining the hole with care. It was clean, precise, as if drilled with a fine tool. Outside, the garden stretched toward a line of trees, the ground soft from recent rain. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he spotted faint impressions in the soil footprints. Perhaps, though too indistinct to identify. The doctor, a stout man named Dr. Hargrove, arrived within the hour. Confirming Poirot's suspicions, Reginald had ingested a mild dose of the same rare toxin that had struck Mary. "He's fortunate," Hargrove said, wiping his brow. "The dose was small delirium, yes, but he'll recover with rest. Another hour, though, and it might have been fatal." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The poison's consistency suggested a single source, likely Eleanor's private collection, as he had learned the previous day. But the locked room presented a new challenge. How had the poison reached Reginald? The key inside ruled out an intruder, locking the door after entry, and the bolted windows eliminated the obvious routes. Yet the hole in the window frame gnawed at him, a clue that refused to be ignored. As Reginald was moved to another room under the doctor's care, Poirot returned to the scene, now alone. He examined the window more closely, using the magnifying glass Grayson had provided. The hole was not only precise, but angled slightly upward, suggesting something had been fired through it from outside. A dart, perhaps. Poirot stepped into the garden, careful not to disturb the soil. The footprints were clearer here, leading from the flower bed to a hedge some 20 yards away. They were shallow, made by a light-footed individual, and stopped abruptly at the hedge, as if the person had vanished. Poirot returned to the house, his mind assembling the pieces. A dart, fired through the window, could explain the poison's delivery. The glass of water, shattered on the floor, might have been the vehicle perhaps. Reginald had drunk from it after the dart struck, unaware of its contamination. But why a dart? And why such a small dose? The poisoner's intent seemed less to kill than to warn or incapacitate. This was no amateur's work. It required precision, planning, and access to the manor's layout. By midday, the household was in disarray. Clara, pacing the drawing room, accused Victor of spying for a rival family, her voice sharp with suspicion. "You're always scribbling, always watching," she snapped. "What's your game, Mr. Hale? Are you here to ruin us?" Victor raised his hands, his charm undimmed. "I'm a journalist, Miss Blackthorne. Curiosity is my trade, but I'm not your poisoner. I've no motive to harm Reginald or anyone else." "Enough," Eleanor interrupted, her voice cutting through the tension. "This bickering solves nothing, Poirot." "What have you found?" Poirot, standing by the fireplace, turned to face the group. "The attack on Monsieur Reginald was no accident, but neither was it meant to kill. The poison was delivered by a dart, fired through a small hole in the window from the garden. The footprints outside suggest an outsider, yet I suspect one among us knows more than they admit." A murmur rippled through the room. Grayson, sweating profusely, stammered an outsider. "But the manor is secure. The gates are locked at night." "Yet locks can be picked, and gates climbed," Poirot replied, his tone measured. "Or perhaps the outsider had help from within." "Tell me, Monsieur Grayson, what do you know of Madame Eleanor's will?" The solicitor paled, his hands trembling. "Her will? I handle her legal affairs, of course. It's confidential, but, well, it favors an unknown beneficiary. Eleanor has kept the details private, even from me, unknown." Clara's eyes flashed. "That's absurd. Aunt Eleanor, you've always said the estate would stay in the family." Eleanor's face remained impassive, though her fingers tightened around her teacup. "My decisions are my own, Clara. You'll know in due time." Poirot noted the exchange, his suspicions deepening. The will, the poison, the ledger hinted at in the maid's note-hall, pointed to a motive rooted in the Blackthorne fortune. Greed was a powerful driver, but so was fear of exposure. The dart's precision suggested a professional, yet the footprint's abrupt end hinted at misdirection. Someone was playing a dangerous game, and Poirot was determined to win. That afternoon, he resolved the locked room mystery by testing his theory. Borrowing a blowpipe from the manor's collection of curiosa relic from Eleanor's late husband's travels, he stood in the garden and aimed at a makeshift target. Through a similar hole in a spare window, the dart flew true, confirming his hypothesis. The poison had been delivered from a distance, likely under cover of darkness, with the window left unbolted just enough to allow the shot. Reginald's survival was likely due to the small dose, a calculated move to sow fear rather than end a life. Satisfied with his deduction, Poirot turned his attention to the evening's event, a masquerade ball, planned before the weekends. Chaos, but now fraught with tension. It was the perfect stage for deception, and Poirot intended to use it to his advantage. He would shadow the guests, observing their masks both literal and figurative for any slip that might reveal the poisoner's identity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Blackthorne Manor transformed. Servants lit chandeliers, their flames casting flickering shadows across the ballroom's gilded walls. Guests donned elaborate costumes, their faces hidden behind masks of silk and feathers. Poirot, dressed as a Venetian noble in a black cloak and silver mask, moved silently among them, his eyes missing nothing. Clara, in a crimson gown, whispered to Victor, who wore a harlequin's motley. Grayson, disguised as a medieval scholar, clung to his wineglass, while Eleanor, resplendent in gold, commanded the room's attention. The music swelled, a waltz that masked the undercurrent of suspicion. Poirot's mind churned, replaying the day's discoveries. The dart, the footprints, the will's mystery. He recalled the maid's note, "Traitor in the inner circle," and wondered if the traitor was among the dancers. Clara's accusation against Victor lingered, as did Grayson's nervous revelation about the will. And Eleanor, her composure was too perfect, her fear too theatrical. Was she truly the target, or was she orchestrating a deeper scheme? As the night wore on, Poirot slipped into the garden, following a hunch. The footprints had ended at the hedge, but he suspected a hidden path. Kneeling in the moonlight, he found it a narrow trail, barely visible, leading to a gate in the estate's wall. It was unlocked, its hinges oiled recently. Someone had planned an escape, or perhaps an entry. Poirot's pulse quickened. The ball, the masks, the chaos, it was all a distraction, a cover for something larger. Returning to the ballroom, he positioned himself near the grand staircase, watching as the guests swirled in a kaleidoscope of color. The music paused, and Eleanor raised a glass to toast her guests, her voice steady despite the recent attacks. "To Blackthorn Manor," she said, "and to secrets kept safe." The words hung in the air, a challenge or a taunt. Poirot's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment he saw a flicker of something defiance, perhaps, or fear. The game was far from over, but Poirot was satisfied. The locked room riddle was solved, the dart's path clear. But the true mystery, the identity of the poisoner, and their motive remained. The masquerade ball would be his next battlefield, and Hercule Poirot was ready to unmask the truth. Chapter 4. Masks and Motives. The air at Blackthorn Manor grew heavier as the evening of the masquerade ball approached. The grand ballroom, with its towering chandeliers and polished oak floors, was transformed into a stage of opulence and deception. Crimson drapes framed the tall windows, their velvet folds catching the flickering light of 100 candles. The guests, adorned in elaborate costumes and masks, moved like players in a grand opera, their identities blurred by silken feathers. Hercule Poirot, ever the observer, stood at the edge of the room, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. He had chosen a Venetian noble's attire, a flowing black cloak, a tricorn hat, and a silver mask that left only his piercing gaze visible. It was the perfect disguise for a man who thrived on seeing what others hid. The ballroom buzzed with nervous energy. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn, resplendent in a gown of emerald green and a peacock-feathered mask, held court near the grand staircase, her laughter ringing out with a practiced charm that failed to mask her unease. Poirot noted the way her gloved hands clutched her wineglass, the slight tremor betraying her composure. She was a woman under siege, her fear of poison now a public declaration. Yet she played her part as hostess with relentless grace. Around her, the guests swirled in a kaleidoscope of colored. Reginald, her son, in a dure black domino mask, his posture stiff with resentment. Clara, her niece, in a golden gown and a delicate lace mask, her movements fluid but her eyes darting. Victor Hale, the journalist, in a roguish harlequin costume, his smile too easy, too calculated. And Mr. Grayson, the solicitor, in a poorly fitted cavalier outfit, his nervous fidgeting clashing with the festive mood. Poirot sipped his champagne, the bubbles sharp against his tongue, and catalogued the room. The masquerade was more than a social event, it was a battlefield of motives, where every gesture could be a feint, every word a weapon. He had resolved, after the maid's poisoning and the discovery of the note warning of a traitor in the inner circle, to use this night to peel back the layers of deception. The note, tucked into the maid's apron, had been written in a hurried scrawl, the ink smudged as if penned in haste. It suggested an insider's knowledge, a betrayal within the family or its trusted circle. Poirot's trap at breakfast had yielded nothing. But the masquerade offered a new opportunity, a chance to observe the guests when they believed their masks shielded them from scrutiny. The orchestra struck up a waltz, and the floor filled with couples gliding in synchronized steps. Poirot declined an offer to dance from a young woman in a swan mask, his focus unwavering. He noticed Clara detach herself from a group near the refreshment table, her golden skirts swishing as she moved toward the French doors leading to the garden. A moment later, Victor followed, his harlequin bells jingling faintly. Poirot set down his glass and slipped through the crowd, his cloak blending with the shadows as he trailed them. The garden was a labyrinth of manicured hedges and moonlit paths, the air cool and scented with jasmine. He kept his distance, his steps silent on the gravel. As Clara and Victor paused beneath a stone archway draped in ivy, their voices were low, but Poirot's keen ears caught fragments of their exchange. "The ledger," Clara hissed, her tone sharp with urgency. "You promised you'd get it." Victor's reply was smoother, almost mocking. "Patience, my dear. It's not as simple as you think. The old man's secrets are buried deep." Poirot's mustache twitched. A ledger likely tied to Eleanor's late husband, Sir Henry Blackthorne, whose shipping empire had been the foundation of the family's wealth. The mention of it confirmed Poirot's suspicions that the motive for the poisoning attempts reached beyond personal grudges to something more tangible, perhaps financial or criminal. He edged closer, careful to avoid the crunch of leaves underfoot. But a twig snapped nearby, and Clara's head whipped around. "Who's there?" she called, her voice sharp. Poirot froze, his silhouette merging with the shadow of a yew tree. Victor placed a hand on her arm, murmuring something soothing, and they moved deeper into the garden, their figures swallowed by the darkness. Poirot did not follow immediately. Instead, he turned his attention to the manor, where the ball continued in a swirl of music and laughter. The exchange had given him a new thread to tug, but he needed more, something concrete, to tie the ledger to the poisonings. Returning to the ballroom, Poirot's eyes sought out Grayson, who was now leaning against a pillar, a glass of brandy in hand. The solicitor's cavalier hat sat askew, and his cheeks were flushed, suggesting he had indulged beyond his usual restraint. Poirot approached, his demeanor genial but his questions precise. "Monsieur Grayson," he said, his voice low, "you seem troubled. Is it the weight of the evening, or perhaps the secrets you carry for Lady Blackthorne?" Grayson started, nearly spilling his drink. "Secrets? I don't know what you mean, Monsieur Poirot." His stammer was telling, his eyes avoiding Poirot's gaze. Poirot pressed gently, his tone disarming. Come, monsieur. A solicitor knows many things, wills, trusts, perhaps even documents, that others would kill to possess." Grayson's hand trembled, and he took a hasty sip of brandy. "I've done nothing wrong," he muttered. "But there was pressure. Documents I had to adjust. Not my choice, you understand." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Adjust? For whom?" Grayson shook his head, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I can't say. They'd ruin me." Before Poirot could probe further, a commotion erupted across the room. The chandeliers flickered, then plunged the ballroom into darkness. Gasps and muffled cries filled the air, followed by the crash of glass. Poirot stood still, his senses heightened, listening for clues in the chaos. When the lights returned, a figure in a crimson cloak and a featureless white mask was darting toward the side exit. A glint of green in their handeliner's emerald necklace, a family heirloom, worth a fortune. The crowd parted in confusion, and Poirot sprang into action, his cloak billowing as he pursued the thief. The figure was swift, dodging through the corridors of the manor, but Poirot's determination was relentless. He cornered the thief in a narrow hallway, where a tapestry of a hunting scene hung askew. "Arrest!" Poirot commanded, his voice cutting through the silence. The figure froze, then turned, the white mask eerie in the dim light. With a swift motion, Poirot seized the thief's wrist, and the necklace fell to the floor with a soft clink. He tugged off the mask, revealing a weathered-faced Tom Wells, the manor's groundskeeper, his eyes wide with panic. "Why, Monsieur Wells?" Poirot asked, his tone calm but unyielding. "What drove you to such a reckless act?" Tom stammered. "I was paid. Didn't know it had come to this. Just needed the money." Poirot's mind raced. A groundskeeper stealing a necklace was no simple theft. It was a piece of a larger puzzle. Escorting Tom to a side room, Poirot secured the necklace in his pocket and summoned 2 footmen to guard the groundskeeper. He then returned to the ballroom, where Eleanor was reassuring the guests, her composure strained but intact. Poirot's thoughts churned. The ledger, the necklace, the poisonings all were connected, but the mastermind remained a shadow. He needed to find the ledger's hiding place, and he suspected Clara and Victor's garden conversation held the key. Slipping away from the crowd, he made his way to Eleanor's study, a room he had briefly glimpsed earlier in the day. It was a sanctuary of oak paneling and leather-bound books, with a massive desk dominating the center. Poirot's search was methodical. He tapped the walls for hollow spaces, checked the desk drawers, and examined the bookshelves. Behind a volume of Shakespeare's tragedies, he found a concealed panel that clicked open with a gentle push. Inside was a small safe, its lock gleaming in the lamplight. Poirot's fingers traced the dial, but he lacked the combination. He noted the safe's existence and replaced the panel, confident that the ledger or evidence of its contents was within. As he stepped back, the door creaked, and Clara stood in the doorway, her golden mask dangling from her hand. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but her eyes wary. "What are you doing here?" Poirot smiled, unruffled, merely admiring the literary tastes of Lady Blackthorne. "And you, mademoiselle? Why are you not at the ball?" Clara hesitated, then stepped inside, closing the door. "I saw you follow us into the garden," she said. "You heard about the ledger?" Poirot tilted his head, neither confirming nor denying. "Perhaps you wish to share what you know, Mademoiselle Clara. The truth, it is a heavy burden too." "Carry alone." Clara's lips tightened, but she said nothing, her silence as telling as words. The night stretched on, the ball winding down as guests retired or stumbled to their rooms. Poirot remained vigilant, piecing together the fragments. Tom's theft suggested an outside influence, someone with enough power to hire a groundskeeper for such a bold act. Grayson's confession of altering documents pointed to blackmail or coercion. Clara and Victor's mention of the ledger tied it to Sir Henry's business, possibly a scandal that threatened the Blackthorne legacy, and Eleanor's fear of poisoning, coupled with the maid's near-death, suggested a calculated campaign to eliminate threats, or sow fear. Poirot returned to the garden, retracing Clara and Victor's path. The moonlight revealed a faint disturbance in the soil near the ivy archa, small, buried tin. He unearthed it, finding a folded note inside, written in the same hurried scrawl as the maid's warning. It read, "The ledger is the key. Destroy it, or all is lost." Poirot tucked the note into his pocket, his mind alight with possibilities. The ledger was not just to record it, was a weapon. One that someone was desperate to control or erase. As dawn approached, the manor grew quiet, the last strains of music fading. Poirot stood alone in the ballroom, the chandeliers now dim, the masks discarded like fallen leaves. He felt the weight of the necklace in his pocket, the note's warning echoing in his mind. The web of betrayal was tightening, but he was satisfied that he had unraveled a crucial layer. The ledger's location was secure, the thief apprehended, and the motives of greed, revenge, or fear were coming into focus. Yet the mastermind, the true architect of this deadly game, remained elusive, a shadow behind the masks. Poirot's eyes gleamed with resolve. The night had been a triumph of observation, but the battle was far from over. He retired to his room, locking the door and placing the necklace in a hidden compartment of his valise. As he lay down, his mind churned through the faces, the words, the lies. The masquerade had revealed much, but it had also deepened the mystery. Who had hired Tom Wells? What did the ledger contain that warranted such risks? And why was Eleanor, the apparent victim, so central to the intrigue? Poirot closed his eyes, his thoughts as precise as a metronome. Tomorrow, he would open the safe, confront Clara with the note, and force the truth into the light. For now he rested, content that his bold risk diving into this nest of vipers had brought him closer to the heart of Blackthorne Manor's secrets. The morning light crept through the curtains, casting a soft glow on the room's ornate furnishings. Poirot rose, his movements deliberate, his mind already mapping the day. He dressed in his usual impeccable stylo-tailored suit, a crisp shirt, and a neatly knotted tie echoing the flamboyance of the previous night. The manor was stirring, servants bustling to prepare breakfast, guests nursing headaches or secrets. Poirot descended to the dining room, where Eleanor presided over a subdued gathering. Reginald was absent, likely still brooding in his room. Clara sat quietly, her eyes fixed on her plate, while Victor chatted amiably with a minor guest, his charm undimmed by the night's events. Grayson was pale, his hands unsteady as he lifted his coffee cup. Poirot took his seat. Accepting a cup of tea with a polite nod, he observed the room, noting the undercurrents of tension. Eleanor's gaze lingered on him, as if gauging his progress. He returned her look with a bland smile, revealing nothing. The conversation was desultory, the guests wary of speaking too freely. Poirot's thoughts returned to the safe. He needed access, but forcing the lock was out of the question. It would alert the culprit. Instead, he would watch Eleanor, who likely knew the combination, and wait for an opportunity. After breakfast, Poirot requested a private word with Eleanor in her drawing room. She agreed, leading him to a sunlit space filled with delicate porcelain and faded tapestries. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, settling into an armchair, "you have been busy, I hear. The necklace such a scandal." Her tone was light, but her eyes were sharp. Poirot inclined his head. "A minor matter, madame, compared to the greater danger. The ledger, for instance, sits. Secrets seem to stir much unrest." Smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "Ledger, I know of no such thing. My husband's business was complex, but I leave such matters to others." Poirot's expression remained neutral, but he noted her deflection. "Of course, madame, yet someone believes this ledger holds power, enough to poison, to steal, to betray." He paused, letting the words hang. Eleanor's fingers tightened on her armrest, but she said nothing. Poirot excused himself, satisfied that he had planted a seed of unease. Eleanor was hiding something, and he would uncover it. The day unfolded with a deceptive calm. Poirot spent the morning interviewing servants, confirming Tom Wells's limited access to the manor's inner workings. The groundskeeper was a pawn, not a player, his desperation exploited by a cunning hand. Poirot then sought out Clara, finding her in the library, poring over a volume of poetry. "Mademoiselle," he said, closing the door, "we must speak of the garden and the note you left there." Clara's eyes widened, but she composed herself. "I don't know what you mean," she said, her voice steady. Poirot produced the tin, opening it to reveal the note. "This, mademoiselle, suggests otherwise. The ledger is the key." "Shall we discuss what you meant?" Clara's shoulders slumped, and she sank into a chair. "I was trying to protect the family," she said. "Uncle Henry's business. There were dealings, things I overheard as a child. I thought the ledger might explain why someone wants Aunt Eleanor dead." Poirot studied her, weighing her sincerity. "And Victor? What is his role?" Clara hesitated. "He's after a story. He thinks the ledger will make his career. I used him to find it." Her confession was partial, Poirot knew, but it was a start. He left her with a warning to be cautious, then sought out Victor, who was lounging in the billiard room, cue in hand. "Monsieur Hale," Poirot said, "your interest in the Blackthorne family is most journalistic. But is it only a story you seek, or something more?" Victor grinned, unperturbed. "Just doing my job, Poirot. The public loves a scandal, and the Blackthornes have plenty." Poirot's eyes narrowed. Then why meet Clara in secret? Why speak of ledgers and stolen secrets? Victor's grin faded, but he shrugged. "She's got her own agenda. I'm just along for the ride." Poirot left the encounter unsatisfied, sensing Victor's deflection was practiced. The journalist was clever, but his motives were murky. As evening approached, Poirot returned to the study, determined to access the safe. He waited until the manor was quiet, then slipped inside. His lock-picking tools, a discreet set he carried for such occasions, ready. The safe's mechanism was complex, but Poirot's fingers were deft, his patience infinite. After several minutes, the lock clicked, and the door swung open. Inside was a leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with coded entries, dates, names, and figures that hinted at illicit transactions. Poirot skimmed the pages, his mind racing. The ledger detailed shipments, payments, and contacts, some marked with a symbol, a stylized B, that suggested the broker. He closed the safe, tucking the ledger under his cloak, and returned to his room to study it further. The entries pointed to a network of dealings, possibly smuggling or fraud, tied to Sir Henry's empire. But why was it hidden, and who sought it now? The night brought a new disturbance. A scream echoed through the manor, and Poirot rushed to the source Eleanor's bedroom. He found her unharmed but shaken, pointing to a chandelier that had crashed to the floor, narrowly missing her. The cables had been tampered with, the cuts clean and deliberate. Poirot examined the wreckage, his mind connecting the sabotage to the ledger. Someone knew he was close. He reassured Eleanor, urging her to remain in her room with the servant, then resumed his vigil by midnight. Poirot had decoded a portion of the ledger, revealing a shipment tied to a London addressa warehouse, known for its ties to a crime syndicate. The pieces were falling into place, but the mastermind's identity remained elusive. He suspected Eleanor, Clara, or Victor, but each had alibis or motives that didn't fully align. Grayson's blackmail suggested an outside force, possibly the broker himself. Poirot resolved to contact Inspector Japp at dawn, seeking information. On the syndicate, as he sat at his desk, the ledger opened before him. A shadow passed the window. Poirot extinguished his lamp, moving silently to the glass. The garden was empty, but the air felt charged, as if the manor itself were holding its breath. He secured the ledger in his valise, alongside the necklace, and prepared for the next day. The masquerade had been a whirl of deception, but Poirot was satisfied that he had secured the ledger and exposed the thief. The web was unraveling, thread by thread, and he was ready to face the next twist in this deadly game. Chapter 5. The ledger's secret Hercule Poirot stood in the dimly lit study of Blackthorn Manor, his gloved hands carefully turning the pages of the ledger he had retrieved from the hidden safe behind Lady Eleanor Blackthorn's portrait. The room was heavy with the scent of old leather and polished wood. The walls lined with bookshelves that stretched to the ceiling, their spines worn from years of neglect. A single lamp cast a golden glow over the desk, illuminating the cryptic entries scrawled in the ledger, a tangle of numbers, initials, and coded phrases that hinted at a dark underbelly to the Blackthorn legacy. Poirot's mustache twitched as he traced a finger over a line of text, his mind already weaving together the threads of the mystery. The ledger was no ordinary record. Its pages, yellowed and brittle, detailed transactions from the late Lord Blackthorn's shipping empire, but the entries were shrouded in secrecy. Instead of straightforward accounts of cargo or profits, there were references to consignments, marked with cryptic symbols, and destinations that didn't align with any known ports. One recurring name caught Poirot's eye, the broker. It appeared repeatedly, tied to shipments valued in the thousands, with no clear indication of what was being transported. Poirot's gray cells hummed with activity. This was no mere bookkeeping error. It was evidence of a clandestine operation, one that had likely funded the opulence of Blackthorn Manor. The air in the study grew colder as the night deepened, the manor's ancient walls creaking under the weight of their secrets. Poirot closed the ledger and placed it carefully on the desk, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of intrusion. The safe had been concealed behind a false panel, its combination known only to Eleanor, or so she claimed. Yet someone had known enough to tamper with her life, to poison her maid, to shoot a dart through Reginald's window. The ledger was the key, Poirot was certain, but its secrets were locked in a code he had yet to fully decipher. He turned his attention to the safe itself, a sturdy iron contraption built into the wall. Its door was still ajar, revealing a small compartment lined with velvet. Inside, he found a single item, aside from the ledger, a folded piece of parchment, its edges frayed. Unfolding it, Poirot discovered a handwritten note. The ink faded but legible. It read, "The broker's reach is long. Trust no one. The truth lies in the numbers." The handwriting was elegant, precise, and unmistakably Eleanor's. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Mon Dieu," he murmured. "The lady herself warns of betrayal, yet she weaves the web." The study door creaked open, and Poirot spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for the silver-topped cane leaning against the desk. It was only Clara, Eleanor's niece, her pale face framed by a cascade of dark curls. She wore a simple, gray dress, but her eyes betrayed a restlessness that Poirot had noted since his arrival. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "I couldn't sleep. I saw the light under the door. Have you found something?" Poirot studied her for a moment, his gaze sharp. Clara's late-night wanderings had not gone unnoticed, and her sudden appearance in the study was no coincidence. "Mademoiselle Clara," he said, his tone polite but probing, "it is curious, Nan, that you find yourself here at this hour. The manor is vast, yet you are drawn to this very room." Clara's cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze. "I'm worried about Aunt Eleanor," she said. "After the maid's poisoning and Reginald's attack, I can't help but feel something terrible is coming. You're the only one who seems to understand what's happening." Poirot tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "And what precisely do you believe is happening, mademoiselle?" Clara hesitated, her fingers twisting the fabric of her dress. "I think someone wants to destroy us," she said. "The Blackthorn name, our wealth, everything. Aunt Eleanor's been acting strangely for months. Secret meetings, locked doors, I thought. I thought the ledger might explain it." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "You know of the ledger, then?" Clara nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I overheard Aunt Eleanor talking to Mr. Grayson about it. She said it was dangerous, that it could ruin us all. I didn't mean to pry, but I needed to know." Poirot considered her words, weighing their sincerity. Clara's concern seemed genuine, but her knowledge of the ledger raised questions. Had she been searching for it herself? And if so, for what purpose? "Very well," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Sit, mademoiselle. Let us discuss this ledger and its secrets." As Clara settled into the chair, Poirot opened the ledger, again, pointing to a page filled with coded entries. "These numbers," he said, "they are not merely accounts of trade. They speak of something far more sinister. Have you any knowledge of the broker?" Clara's eyes widened, and she shook her head. "No, I've never heard that name. Is it a person?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his voice measured. "Or perhaps it is a title, a mask for someone within these walls. The ledger suggests a connection to illegal dealing, smuggling, perhaps, or worse. Your aunt's late husband, Lord Blackthorn, was not, I think, the simple merchant he appeared to be." Clara's hands trembled slightly, but she clasped them together to steady them. "Uncle Henry died years ago," she said. "I was only a child, but I remember the whispers people said his business wasn't always honest. Aunt Eleanor never spoke of it, though. She said the past was better left buried. Yet the past. Mademoiselle has a way of clawing its way to the surface," Poirot said. He tapped the ledger. "This document is the key to the poisonings, the dart, the theft of the necklace. Someone wishes to protect its secrets or to expose them." Before Clara could respond, a loud crash echoed through the manor, followed by a woman's scream. Poirot was on his feet in an instant, his cane in hand as he strode toward the door. "Stay here," he ordered Clara, his voice firm. "Do not touch the ledger." He hurried into the hallway, the sound of his polished shoes echoing on the marble floor. The scream had come from the direction of the grand dining room, where the chandelier hung like a glittering crown over the table. As Poirot reached the doorway, he saw Eleanor standing at the center of the room, her face pale, her hands clutching the back of a chair. Above her, the massive chandelier swayed precariously, its crystals tinkling like a warning bell. One of its supporting chains had snapped, and the entire fixture hung at an alarming angle, threatening to crash to the floor. "Monsieur Poirot," Eleanor gasped, her voice trembling. "It fell out of nowhere. I was standing right here, and it nearly killed me." Poirot's eyes darted to the chandelier, then to the floor, where a heavy iron bolt lay among the scattered debris. He knelt to examine it, his fingers tracing the clean cut along its edge. "This was no accident," he said, his voice low. "The bolt has been tampered with, sawed nearly through. Someone intended for this chandelier to fall, madame." Eleanor's hand flew to her chest. "But who would do such a thing? First the poison, now this. I'm not safe in my own home." Poirot stood, his expression grim. "Madame, you are the target of a most deliberate plot. But fear not. Hercule Poirot is here, and he does not permit such crimes to go unpunished." He moved quickly to the chandelier's base, inspecting the remaining chains. They were intact, but the sabotage was unmistakable. Someone had climbed to the ceiling, likely during the chaos of the masquerade ball, and weakened the structure. The question was not only who, but why. Was this another attempt to silence Eleanor? Or was it meant to distract from something else? As the household staff rushed in, alerted by the commotion, Poirot took charge. "Secure the room," he instructed. "No one is to touch the chandelier until I have examined it further." He turned to Eleanor. "Madame, you must retire too. Your chambers with a guard. I will ensure your safety." Eleanor nodded, her composure fraying. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I don't know what I'd do without you." As she was escorted away, Poirot returned to the study, his mind racing. Clara was still there, standing by the desk, her eyes wide with fear. "Was it Aunt Eleanor?" she asked. "Is she all right?" "She is unharmed," Poirot said, "but the danger grows. The ledger, Mademoiselle, it is the heart of this mystery. Tell me, have you ever seen your aunt with strange visitors, men or women who did not belong among her usual circle?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. "A few months ago, there was a man. He came late at night, dressed in a dark coat. I only saw him from the window, but Aunt Eleanor met him in the garden. They argued about something money, I think. I couldn't hear clearly." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And this man, did you see him again?" "No," Clara said, "but I found a cigarette case in the garden the next morning, engraved with the initials J.B. I gave it to Aunt Eleanor, and she seemed frightened." J.B. Poirot repeated, committing the initials to memory. "This is most interesting. And where is this cigarette case now?" "I don't know," Clara admitted. "She took it and never mentioned it again." Poirot nodded, his mind already piecing together possibilities. The initials could belong to anyone, but the timing of the visit and Eleanor's reaction suggested a connection to the broker. He needed more information, and he knew exactly where to turn the next morning. Poirot summoned Victor Hale, the journalist, to the library. Victor arrived with his usual charm, his smile disarming, but his eyes wary. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, settling into a chair, "I hear you've been playing detective with that ledger. Found anything juicy?" Poirot's expression remained impassive. "Monsieur Hale, your curiosity about the Blackthorne family is most pronounced. Tell me, what is the true purpose of your presence here? An expose, perhaps? A scandal to sell your newspapers?" Victor laughed, but there was a nervous edge to it. "You've got me all wrong, Poirot. I'm just a guest, enjoying the hospitality of Blackthorne Manor." "Nan," Poirot said, leaning forward. "You are a man with a purpose. I have observed you, monsieur. You ask questions that are not casual. You linger where secrets are kept. You know of the ledger, do you not?" Victor's smile faded. "All right, I'll level with you. I'm working on a story about the Blackthorne shipping empire. There have been rumors for years, smuggling, black market deals, you name it. I thought Eleanor might be sitting on a goldmine of secrets. When she invited me here, I couldn't resist." "And what have you found?" Poirot asked, his voice sharp. Victor hesitated, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notebook. "Bits and pieces," he said. "I've been digging into old shipping records, cross-referencing names and dates. There's a pattern shipment that never made it to their official destinations, payments to someone called the broker. I think Eleanor's husband was in deep with a crime syndicate, and she's been covering it up ever since." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you believe this ledger holds the proof?" "I'd bet my career on it," Victor said. "But I haven't seen it. Eleanor keeps it locked away." "If you've got it, Poirot, you're holding the key to the biggest story of the decade." Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Monsieur Hale, your ambition is admirable, but it makes you a suspect. If you sought the ledger, perhaps you poisoned the maid to create a distraction. Perhaps you tampered with the chandelier to force Eleanor's hand." Victor's face paled. "Now, hold on. I'm no murderer. I'm just after the truth." "Truth," Poirot said, "is a dangerous thing in Blackthorne Manor. You will show me this notebook." "Monsieur, and we shall see how much truth you have uncovered." Reluctantly, Victor handed over the notebook. Poirot flipped through its pages, noting names, dates, and cryptic references to the broker. One entry caught his attention: a shipment dated 5 years ago, marked with the initials JB, and a destination listed as London, Syndicate. It matched the timeline Clara had described. Poirot closed the notebook and handed it back. "You will remain here, monsieur, until I have verified your claims." As Victor left, Poirot turned his attention back to the ledger, determined to crack its code. He spent hours poring over the entries, cross-referencing them with Victor's notes. The pattern began to emerge: shipments of unspecified goods, funneled through a network of intermediaries, all tied to the broker. One entry stood out: a transaction dated just before Lord Blackthorn's death, involving a shipment worth £50,000 to a London address. The address was familiar, one Poirot had encountered in a previous case involving a crime syndicate operating out of the city's docks. The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was far from complete. Poirot needed to confirm the syndicate's involvement, and he knew just the man to help. He sent a telegram to Inspector Japp, his old friend at Scotland Yard, requesting information on the London syndicate and any known associates with the initials JB. While awaiting a response, he continued his investigation within the manor. That afternoon, Poirot found Reginald Blackthorne in the conservatory, tending to a collection of exotic orchids. Reginald's hands moved with surprising delicacy, a contrast to his usual aloof demeanor. "Monsieur Reginald," Poirot said, approaching, "you have a talent for cultivation, I see. Yet I wonder if your interests extend to the family's secrets." Reginald's jaw tightened, but he didn't look up. "What do you want, Poirot? I've told you everything I know, have you?" Poirot said, his voice soft but insistent. "You have shown little concern for your mother's safety, yet much interest in her wealth. The ledger, monsieur, it mentions transactions that could ruin the Blackthorne name. Were you aware of your father's dealings?" Reginald sat down, his pruning shears, his eyes cold. "My father was a businessman, nothing more. If there's dirt in that ledger, it's Mother's doing. She's the one who's been hiding things, locking herself away with Grayson, whispering about documents and inheritances." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "You suspect your mother of wrongdoing." "I suspect everyone," Reginald snapped. "This family's built on lies. I just want what's mine." "And what is yours, Monsieur Poirot?" asked the estate. "The fortune, or perhaps the secrets that could destroy them both." Reginald turned away, his silence telling. Poirot noted his reaction, adding it to the growing list of motives. Greed, revenge, ambition. Each guest had their own reason to covet the ledger. But only one was the broker, and Poirot was determined to unmask them as evening fell. Poirot returned to the study, the ledger opened before him. He had made progress on the code, identifying a pattern in the numbers that corresponded to dates and amounts. One entry, dated 3 months ago, referenced a shipment to JB, with a note: "Final payment due." It was the most recent mention of the broker, suggesting they were still active, possibly within the manor. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Mr. Grayson, the solicitor, his face pale and his hands trembling. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice hoarse, "I must speak with you. It's about the ledger. I know something." Poirot gestured for him to enter. "Speak, monsieur. The time for secrets is past." Grayson sat heavily, his eyes darting to the ledger. "I helped Eleanor manage the estate after Lord Blackthorne's death," he said. "There were irregularities. Shipments that didn't add up. Payments to people I didn't know. She told me it was all legitimate, but I saw the ledger once, years ago. It mentioned the broker. I didn't ask questions, I was afraid to. And now," Poirot asked, "why do you come to me now?" "Because I'm scared," Grayson admitted. "After the chandelier, I realized I could be next. I don't know who the broker is, but they're dangerous. Eleanor's been receiving letters, unsigned, demanding money. I think they're from the broker." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And these letters, where are they?" "She burned them," Grayson said. "But I saw one. It mentioned a meeting at an old mill near the estate. I think that's where she was going to pay them off." Poirot leaned forward. When, monsieur? When was this meeting to take place? Tomorrow night, Grayson said. At midnight, Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The mill was the perfect place for a trap, and he would be there to spring it. But first, he needed to protect the ledger and ensure Eleanor's safety. He locked the ledger in the safe, replacing it with a blank notebook filled with meaningless numbers. If the broker came for it, they would find nothing. As Grayson left, Poirot sat back, his fingers drumming on the desk. The net was tightening, but the danger was far from over. The broker was close, their presence a shadow over Blackthorn Manor. Poirot's instincts told him the truth was within reach, but he would need to tread carefully. One misstep, and the web of betrayal would ensnare them all. The following day, Poirot spent the morning observing the guests, noting their interactions. Clara avoided Victor, her eyes filled with suspicion. Reginald kept to himself, his mood darker than usual. Victor, meanwhile, was unusually quiet, his charm replaced by a nervous energy. Poirot wondered if he was planning to flee, or if he was waiting for an opportunity to strike. At noon, a telegram arrived from Inspector Japp. It confirmed Poirot's suspicions. The London syndicate was known for smuggling high-value goods, including stolen artifacts and contraband. A figure known as the broker had been linked to their operations, but their identity remained a mystery. The initials JB appeared in their records, tied to a series of payments over the past decade. Japp promised to send men to Blackthorn Manor by evening, but Poirot knew he couldn't wait. The meeting at the mill was his chance to catch the broker. That afternoon, Poirot took a walk through the manor's gardens, his mind piecing together the final clues. The cigarette case, the ledger, the chandelier all pointed to a carefully orchestrated plan. The broker was someone with intimate knowledge of the manor, someone who could move unseen, manipulate events, and inspire fear. Eleanor was the obvious suspect, but Poirot's instincts told him there was more to her fear than guilt. She was a target, yes, but also a player in this deadly game. As dusk fell, Poirot prepared for the night's confrontation. He slipped a small revolver into his pocket, though he preferred to rely on his wits. He informed Eleanor that he would be inspecting the estate's perimeter, a lie, to keep her from suspecting his true destination. Clara and Reginald were told to stay in their rooms, and Victor was under watch by one of the manors, Footmen. At 11 o'clock, Poirot set out for the mill, a crumbling stone structure half a mile from the manor. The night was cold, the moon hidden behind clouds. He moved silently, his cane tapping lightly on the path. The mill loomed ahead, its broken windows like empty eyes. Poirot crouched behind a stack of crates, his eyes scanning the darkness. At midnight, a figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked and hooded. They carried a small package, moving with purpose toward the mill's entrance. Poirot's heart quickened. Was this the broker? He waited, his breath steady, until the figure disappeared inside. Then, moving with surprising agility for a man of his stature, he followed. Inside, the mill was a maze of rusted machinery and cobwebs. The figure stood near a table, their back to Poirot. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. Monsieur, or perhaps Madame, your game is over. Hercule Poirot has found you. The figure froze, then slowly turned. The hood fell back, revealing not Eleanor, not Victor, but Mr. Grayson, his face pale and sweating. Poirot, he stammered, it's not what you think. I'm not the broker. I was delivering the package for Eleanor. Shea forced me. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Forced you, monsieur? Or did you seek to betray her, to sell the ledger's secrets to the highest bidder? Before Grayson could answer, a noise came from the shadows, a rustle, then the click of a gun. Poirot spun, his revolver drawn, but he was too late. A dart, silent and deadly, struck Grayson in the neck. He gasped, clutching at the wound, and collapsed. Poirot dropped to his knees, checking Grayson's pulse. It was faint but present. The dart was identical to the one used on Reginald, tipped with the same rare toxin. Poirot scanned the darkness, but the attacker was gone. He cursed under his breath, his mind racing. The broker was still out there, and they were one step ahead. He carried Grayson back to the manor, calling for help. The solicitor was taken to the infirmary, where the doctor confirmed he would survive, though he remained unconscious. Poirot returned to the study, his resolve hardened. The broker had struck again, but they had made a mistake. The dart, the package, the meeting at the Malal were clues, and Poirot would use them to tighten the noose. As dawn broke, Poirot sat at the desk, the ledger open before him. He had decoded another section, revealing a shipment linked to a London dockyard owned by a company called JB Enterprises. The initials were no coincidence. The broker was close, their identity hidden in plain sight. Poirot leaned back, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. The web of betrayal was unraveling, and he was one step closer to the truth. Chapter 6. The Syndicate's Shadow. The dawn light filtered through the heavy drapes of Blackthorn Manor, casting long jagged shadows across the oak-paneled study where Hercule Poirot sat. His fingers steepled, his eyes fixed on the ledger before him. The leather-bound book, its edges worn and its pages yellowed, lay open to a page of cryptic numbers and abbreviations. To an untrained eye, it was gibberish a merchant's sloppy accounting, perhaps, but to Poirot, it was a map to the heart of a criminal enterprise. The coded entries pointed to shipments, payments, and names, all veiled in a cipher that Poirot had only partially cracked. The word broker appeared repeatedly, a ghost in the text, and Poirot knew that unmasking this figure was the key to unraveling the web of betrayal that clung to the manor like damp mist. He closed the ledger with a soft thud and rose, adjusting his impeccable mustache. The events of the previous night, the near-fatal chandelier, Clara's stained gloves, Victor's forged passport had confirmed his suspicions. The poisonings, the theft, the cryptic notes were not isolated acts but threads in a larger tapestry. The broker, whoever they were, was not just a guest at Blackthorn Manor, but a mastermind orchestrating chaos from within. Poirot's mind churned with possibilities, but one certainty anchored him. The syndicate's reach extended far beyond. Devon and its shadow now loomed over every soul in the house. The morning was crisp, the air heavy with the scent of dew-soaked roses as Poirot stepped into the garden. He had wired Inspector Japp at first light, requesting urgent assistance. Japp, ever reliable, despite his gruff demeanor, had promised to arrive by noon, with information on the London crime syndicate linked to the ledger's shipments. Until then, Poirot would work alone, his little grey cells humming as he pieced together the clues. The groundskeeper, Tom Wells, had been a minor player, his theft of the emerald necklace a distraction. The real prize was the ledger, and the real threat was the broker. Poirot's first task was to re-examine the scene of the chandelier's sabotage. The ballroom, now silent, bore the scars of the previous night's chaos. Chairs overturned, a shattered wineglass glinting in the corner. The chandelier itself, a monstrous confection of crystal and brass, hung precariously, its chains secured by Poirot's quick intervention. He climbed a ladder left by the staff, his movements precise despite the height, and inspected the bolts. One had been loosened, not cut, suggesting haste or an interrupted plan. A faint scratch on the metal caught his Aja tool mark, perhaps from a small wrench. He filed the detail away, descending to the floor where a maid was sweeping glass. "Mademoiselle," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "did anyone enter the ballroom yesterday evening, before the guests arrived?" The maid, a young woman, with nervous eyes, shook her head. "No, sir. The room was locked all day, except when Mr. Grayson checked the lights." Grayson. Poirot's eyebrow arched. The solicitor's name kept surfacing, like a fish breaking water. "And what time was this?" "About 6, sir. He said Lady Eleanor wanted the chandelier polished." Poirot nodded, dismissing her with a smile. Grayson's alibi for the evening was shaky, and now he was tied to the ballroom. The solicitor's nervous demeanor and contradictory stories suggested guilt, but Poirot cautioned himself against hasty conclusions. A man could be nervous without being a murderer, just as a murderer could be calm. He returned to the study, where Clara Blackthorn awaited him. She sat by the window, her auburn hair catching the light, her fingers twisting a handkerchief. Her gloves, stained with the rare toxin, had been confiscated by Poirot the previous night, and her eyes betrayed a mix of defiance and fear. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, her voice steady despite her pallor. "You must believe me, I didn't poison the maid. Those gloves, I don't know how the poison got there." Poirot tilted his head, studying her. "Mademoiselle Clara, you have been most secretive. The ledger, the late-night walks, the note to Victor Hale. You claim you seek to protect your inheritance, yet you act like one with something to hide. Tell me, what is your connection to the broker?" Her eyes widened, and for a moment, Poirot thought she might bolt. But she steadied herself, her jaw tightening. "I've heard the name," she admitted. "My Uncle Eleanor's husband mentioned it years ago, before he died. He said the broker was someone powerful, someone who controlled half the shipping trade in London. I thought it was just business talk, but after his death, I found papers in his study. They mentioned the broker, and payments to Blackthorn Manor. Payments." Poirot leaned forward, his voice low. "For what purpose?" Clara hesitated, then reached into her pocket, producing a folded letter. "I found this last week, hidden in Eleanor's desk. I didn't tell you before, because I wasn't sure what it meant." Poirot took the letter, his gloved fingers unfolding it carefully. The paper was old, the ink faded, but the words were clear. "The broker demands silence. The shipment arrives at Dover, midnight, the 12th of April. Payment in full, or the manor burns." The date was 10 years past, the signature a single initial. "B. This is most interesting," Poirot murmured, his mind racing. The letter confirmed the syndicate's grip on the Blackthorn family, but it also raised questions. Why had Eleanor kept it? Was she a victim, or complicit? And why had Clara hidden it until now? Before he could press further, a knock interrupted them. It was Victor Hale, the journalist, his charming smile replaced by a grim expression. "Poirot, you'd better come quick." Reginald's collapsed in the library. Poirot followed Victor, Clara trailing behind. The library was a cavern of books, their spines gleaming in the morning light. Reginald Blackthorn lay slumped in an armchair, his face pale, his breathing shallow. A glass of brandy sat on the table beside him, its contents half spilled. Poirot knelt, checking his pulse, weak but steady. "Mon Dieu," Poirot muttered, sniffing the glass. A faint, bitter odor confirmed his fears. "The same toxin, I presume. But a smaller dose, oui. He lives, but he is not well." Victor hovered, his eyes darting to the door. "I found him like this. I swear, I didn't." "Calmez-vous, Monsieur Hale," Poirot said sharply. "You will explain your movements later. For now, fetch the doctor." As Victor hurried out, Poirot turned to Clara. "Mademoiselle, you were here earlier, were you not? Did you see Reginald drink?" Clara shook her head, her voice trembling. "I was in the garden. I only came in when I heard Victor shout." Poirot's eyes narrowed. Clara's story was plausible, but her presence at every crisis was no coincidence. He sent her to fetch a servant, then examined the room. The brandy decanter on the sideboard was untouched, but a small vial, identical to the one found with the maid, lay hidden beneath a cushion. Poirot pocketed it, his mind turning to the locked room mystery. The dart, the poison, the chandelier all pointed to a methodical mind, one that planned for every contingency. By noon, Inspector Japp arrived, his bowler hat askew, and his mustache bristling with irritation. "Poirot, you dragged me all the way to Devon for this. A manor full of toffs and poison. I'd rather be chasing pickpockets in Whitechapel." Poirot smiled thinly. "My dear Japp, you will find this case most stimulating. The broker, you see, is no common criminal. He or she is a phantom, pulling strings from London to Devon. Tell me, what have you learned?" Japp pulled out a notebook, flipping through pages. "Your syndicate's a nasty lot. They've been running contraband opium, mostly through Dover for years. The broker's their kingpin, but no one's ever seen him. Word is, he vanished after a heist went bad 5 years ago. Left a trail of bodies and a fortune in stolen gold." Poirot's eyes gleamed, and this gold, it was never recovered, not a penny. "The syndicate's been quiet since, but your ledger suggests they're back. Those shipments you mentioned, dates and docks, they match recent seizures at Dover. Someone's moving goods again." and they're using Blackthorn Manor as a front. Poirot nodded, his mind aligning the pieces. The broker had not vanished, but hidden, perhaps among the guests. Eleanor, with her wealth and connections, was a likely candidate, but her fear of poisoning suggested otherwise. Reginald, Clara, Victor, Grayson each had motive, means, or opportunity, but none fit perfectly. The groundskeeper, Tom Wells, was a pawn, but his employer was the key. Jap, Poirot said, we must speak to Tom Wells again. He knows more than he has told. They found Tom in the stables, mucking out stalls under the watchful eye of a constable. His weathered face tightened as Poirot approached. I've told you everything, sir. I took the necklace for money. Didn't know about no ledger. Poirot's voice was soft, almost hypnotic. Monsieur Wells, you're a simple man. But not so simple as to steal from a lady like Eleanor, without reason, who paid you. And do not lie, for I see the truth in your eyes. Tom shifted, his hands gripping the pitchfork. I don't know his name. A man in a black coat met me at the village pub. Said he'd pay me £50 to take the necklace and leave it in the mill. Said it was to settle a debt. The mill. Poirot's mind flashed to the ledger's coded message about a meeting. When did this man contact you? 2 nights ago. He knew things about the manor, about Lady Eleanor's collection. Said he'd be watching. Jap grunted, scribbling in his notebook. Sounds like our broker. But why the necklace? A distraction. Precise, Poirot said. The necklace was a lure, to draw attention from the ledger. But the mill, that is where we find the truth. Jap, we must go there tonight. The abandoned mill stood a mile from the manor, its silhouette stark against the twilight. Sky ivy clung to its crumbling walls, and the air smelled of damp wood and rust. Poirot and Jap, accompanied by 2 constables, approached cautiously, their lanterns casting flickering beams. The mill's door was ajar, and inside, the air was thick with dust. Footprints crisscrossed the floor, leading to a trapdoor in the corner. Poirot knelt, examining the trapdoor's hinges. Recently used, he murmured, and looked mud, fresh from the riverbank. Jap signaled the constables, who pried open the trapdoor, to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The group descended, their footsteps echoing. At the bottom, they found a small chamber, its walls lined with crates. Poirot opened one, revealing bundles of opium wrapped in oilcloth. Mon Dieu, he whispered. The syndicate's storehouse. Jap whistled. Enough here to flood London's streets. But where's our man? A faint noise, a scrape of metal came from above. Poirot spun, his lantern catching a figure darting through the mill's upper floor. After him, he shouted. The chase was brief but chaotic, the figure weaving through the mill's rotting beams. One constable tackled him, revealing none other than Grayson, the solicitor, his face streaked with sweat and dust. A package fell from his coat, a bundle of papers, singed at the edges. Grayson, Poirot said, his voice cold. You disappoint me. What are these papers? Grayson sagged, his defiance crumbling. I didn't want this. They forced me. I owe money gambling debts. The broker said if I delivered the ledger's papers, they'd clear my slate. Who is the broker? Poirot pressed. I don't know, Grayson's voice cracked. I never saw his face. He sent notes, left them in my room. Said if I didn't obey, they'd kill me. Jap hauled Grayson to his feet. You're coming with us, mate. Let's see what else you've been hiding. Back at the manor, Poirot examined the singed papers. They were fragments of a contract, detailing a shipment of opium to a London buyer. One name stood out. V. Hal, Victor, the journalist, was implicated, but Poirot sensed a frame. The papers were too convenient, the ink too fresh. Someone wanted Victor blamed. He summoned Victor, who arrived pale but composed. Monsieur Hale, Poirot said, you have a forged passport, and now your name appears in the syndicate's papers. Explain. Victor's jaw tightened. I'm a journalist, Poirot. I've been investigating the Blackthorn fortune for months. The syndicate's been after me since I got too close. That passport's a fake, yes, but I needed it to stay alive. Someone's setting me up. And who might that be? Poirot asked, his eyes piercing. Victor hesitated. Clara. She's been watching me, slipping notes. I think she's working for the broker." Poirot dismissed him, his mind racing. Clara's gloves, Victor's passport, Grayson's debts. Reginald's collapse, all were pieces of a puzzle, but the center was missing. He decided to stage a trap, a tactic he had used before to flush out the guilty. He instructed Jap to spread word that Victor was under arrest as the broker, hoping to provoke a reaction. That night, as the manor slept, Poirot watched from the shadows of the garden. A figure emerged from the side door, Victor moving swiftly toward the stables. Poirot followed, silent as a cat, and saw him mount a horse. Before Victor could ride off, Jap's men appeared, lanterns blazing, and apprehended him. "I'm not the broker," Victor shouted as they bound his hands. "You're making a mistake." Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm. "Perhaps, Monsieur Hale, but you flee like a guilty man. If not the broker, then who?" Victor's eyes darted. "To the manor. Ask Clara. She's the one with blood on her hands." The chapter closed with Poirot standing in the moonlight, the manor's windows dark and unyielding. He was satisfied that the syndicate's shadow was lifting, but the broker remained elusive. Clara, Victor, or someone else entirely, the truth was close, and Poirot would not rest until it was revealed. Chapter 7. The groundskeeper's tale. The dawn light filtered through the heavy drapes of Blackthorn Manor, casting long, wavering shadows across the oak-paneled walls of the library where Hercule Poirot sat, his fingers steepled, his gray eyes narrowed in contemplation. The events of the previous night, the masquerade ball, the theft of the emerald necklace, the discovery of the ledger had woven a tighter web around the mystery. Yet the elusive figure of the broker remained a shadow, slipping through his grasp. The air was thick with the scent of old leather and wax polish, but to Poirot it carried the sharper temps of deceit. He had resolved to interrogate the groundskeeper, Tom Wells, whose unexpected role as the necklace thief had opened a new thread. In the tangled skein of Blackthorn's secrets, Poirot rose, adjusting his immaculate black tie, and made his way to the manor's drawing room, where Inspector Japp had detained Tom Wells. The groundskeeper sat hunched in a high-backed chair, his weathered hands cuffed, his face a map of creases under a mop of graying hair. Japp, leaning against a sideboard, gave Poirot a nod, his expression a mix of exasperation and curiosity. The room was silent, save for the ticking of a grandfather clock, its pendulum swinging like a metronome to Poirot's thoughts. "Monsieur Wells," Poirot began, his voice calm but edged with authority, "you have found yourself in a most unfortunate position. The theft of Lady Blackthorn's necklace is no small matter, but I suspect it is but a piece of a larger puzzle. You will tell me, s'il vous plaît, who paid you to steal it, and why." Tom's eyes darted to Japp, then back to Poirot. His lips parted, but no sound came. He shifted, the cuffs clinking softly. "I ain't no thief by nature, sir," he said at last, his Devon accent thick. "I was desperate. See. Me, daughter's sick, needs medicine we can't afford. This person, they knew it. Left me a note, they did, with a promise of money. Said to take the necklace during the ball, leave it in a hollow tree by the west gate. I didn't know it had caused such a stir." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A note, you say? And this person, they did not reveal their identity?" Tom shook his head. "No, sir. The note was slipped under me door at the cottage. No name, no face. Just instructions and a promise of £500. I burned the note after, like they said." "Convenient," Japp muttered, crossing his arms. "And you expect us to believe you didn't know who you were working for? It's the truth." Tom's voice rose, cracking. "I'd never done nothin' like this before. I only took the job 'cause I had no choice." Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes silent on the thick carpet. "Describe this note, Monsieur Wells. The paper, the ink, the handwriting, every detail, if you please." Tom frowned, his brow furrowing. It was plain paper, like what you'd find in any house. Black ink, neat writing, but odd, like it was written careful, to hide the hand. No signature, just a mark at the bottom, a little circle with a line through it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A circle with a line through it. Most interesting. He turned to Jap. Mon ami, this market is familiar. Nan. The ledger we retrieved from Lady Blackthorn's safe contained a similar symbol in its margins. A cipher, perhaps, or a signature of the broker. Jap raised an eyebrow. You think this groundskeeper is mixed up with the syndicate? Not willingly, Poirot replied. But he is a pawn, used by someone who knows the manor's secrets. Tell me, Monsieur Wells, where is this hollow tree? By the west gate, sir, near the old mill path. It's a gnarled oak, been there forever. I left the necklace there, like they asked, but I swear I don't know who took it. Poirot exchanged a glance with Jap. Then we shall investigate this tree, Inspector, and we shall do so at once. The morning was crisp, the Devon air heavy with dew, as Poirot and Jap, accompanied by 2 constables, made their way across the manor's sprawling grounds. The west gate loomed ahead, its iron bars rusted but sturdy, flanked by overgrown hedges. Beyond it, the path to the abandoned mill wound through a copse of ancient trees. Poirot's eyes scanned the landscape, noting the churned earth where footprints crisscrossed the grass. The oak Tom described stood alone, its trunk twisted and hollowed by time. Jap knelt by the tree, peering into the cavity. Nothing here. Now, he said, brushing dirt from his hands. But someone's been digging recently. Look at the soil freshly turned. Poirot crouched beside him, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of the hollow. And observe the bark is scratched, as if something heavy was dragged against it. The necklace, perhaps, or something more. He straightened, his gaze sweeping. The path, this mill, Inspectorate, is nearby, yes. Half a mile, maybe less, Jap said. Been abandoned for years, ever since the Blackthorn shipping business went south. Locals say it's haunted. Then it is the perfect place for secrets to hide, Poirot said. We shall visit this mill, but first, we must ensure Monsieur Wells does not vanish like his employer. They returned to the manor, where Tom was placed under guard in a guest room. Poirot, restless, paced the conservatory, his mind turning over the pieces of the puzzle. The ledger's coded entries, the poisoned maid, the dart through window, the stolen necklace all pointed to a mastermind orchestrating chaos from within the manor. The broker, he was certain, was no mere criminal, but a figure of cunning, embedded in the household's very heart. By midday, Poirot and Jap set out for the mill, a crumbling stone structure, half swallowed by ivy. The air inside was damp, smelling of mold and rust. Broken machinery littered the floor, and cobwebs draped the rafters like ghostly curtains. Poirot moved carefully, his cane tapping against the uneven stone. In a corner, he spotted a pile of ash, the remnants of burned paper. Kneeling, he sifted through it with a handkerchief, uncovering a fragment with a single phrase. Final reckoning at dawn. Jap regardus. Poirot held up the fragment. This is no coincidence. The broker plans a meeting, perhaps to tie up loose ends. And dawn it is tomorrow, I presume. Jap frowned. You think they'll show up? Could be a trap. Perhaps, Poirot said, but a trap works both ways. We shall be ready. They searched the mill further, finding a hidden compartment beneath a loose floorboard. Inside was a small package wrapped in oilcloth, containing a vial of the same rare toxin used on the maid, and a folded map of Blackthorn Manor's grounds. With the chapel circled in red ink, Poirot's pulse quickened. The chapel, he murmured. It is there the final act will play out. Back at the manor, Poirot summoned the guests to the dining room, his demeanor calm but his eyes sharp. Eleanor Blackthorn sat at the head of the table, her face pale but composed. Reginald slouched in his chair, nursing a brandy, while Clara fidgeted with her gloves, her gaze darting to Victor Hale, who leaned against the wall, scribbling in a notebook. Mr. Grayson, the solicitor, mopped his brow, his nervousness palpable. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot, began, the net tightens. The groundskeeper, Tom Wells, has revealed he was paid to steal Lady Blackthorn's necklace by an anonymous figure, who left a note marked with a circle and line symbol found in the ledger of illicit dealings. This same figure, I believe, is the broker, a mastermind, who has woven a web of betrayal around this house. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Are you accusing one of us, Monsieur Poirot? Not yet, Poirot said. "But I am close. The broker has left clues, perhaps intentionally, to test our resolve. A burned letter at the mill speaks of a final reckoning at dawn. I propose we watch the chapel tomorrow, where I suspect the truth will be revealed." Clara gasped. "The chapel? But it's been locked for years." "Precisely," Poirot said. "A locked place is a perfect stage for secrets." The guests dispersed, their faces a gallery of suspicion and fear. Poirot, however, lingered, his mind racing. He returned to the library, where he pored over the ledger again, decoding another entry, a shipment of contraband, dated a decade ago, linked to a London dockworker named Silas Reed. The name stirred a memory. Jap had mentioned Reed as a known associate of the broker. Presumed dead after a warehouse fire. Could Reed be alive, hiding among them? That evening, Poirot dined alone, his thoughts consumed by the chapel. He recalled its Gothic arches, its stained glass windows depicting saints and sinners. A fitting backdrop for a confession. He resolved to stake out the chapel with Jap, but first, he needed to confront Grayson, whose nervous demeanor suggested more than mere cowardice. In Grayson's room, Poirot found the solicitor packing a suitcase, his hands trembling. "Going somewhere, Monsieur Grayson?" Poirot asked, closing the door. Grayson flinched. I can't stay, Monsieur Poirot. This place is cursed. I only did what I was told." "And what were you told?" Poirot's voice was soft but unyielding. Grayson sank onto the bed, his face crumpling. "I was blackmailed. Years ago, I ran up debts gambling, you see. Someone paid them off, but in return, I had to spy on Lady Blackthorne, alter documents, feed information to a contact. I didn't know it was the broker until recently. They threatened to expose me, ruin my career." "Who was this contact?" Poirot pressed. "I never saw their face. Notes, always notes, left in my office, or slipped into my coat. The same mark a circle with a line. I delivered a package to the mill last week, but I swear I didn't know what was in it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And this package, where did you leave it?" "In the mill, under a floorboard. I was told to burn a letter there, too. I didn't read it, I swear." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Grayson was a pawn, like Tom, but the pattern was clear. The broker used fear and desperation to control their network. He left Grayson with a warning to remain in the manor, and rejoined Jap, outlining his plan for the chapel stakeout. As midnight approached, Poirot and Jap took positions in the manor's grounds, hidden among the yew trees near the chapel. The night was still, the moon a sliver behind clouds. Poirot's senses were sharp, attuned to every rustle and snap. At 2 a.m., a figure emerged from the manor's side door, cloaked and hooded, moving swiftly toward the chapel. Poirot signaled Jap, and they followed, silent as shadows. The chapel door creaked open, and the figure slipped inside. Poirot and Jap crept closer, peering through a cracked window. The figure lit a candle, revealing a small table with a package and other oilcloth bundle. As they opened it, Poirot caught a glimpse of papers and a glint of metal. Before he could act, a second figure appeared, this one masked, and a hushed argument ensued. Words like ledger and exposure reached Poirot's ears. Jap moved to intervene, but Poirot held him back. "Wait, mon ami. Let them reveal themselves." The masked figure drew a pistol, and the cloaked one froze. "You've gone too far," the masked figure hissed. "The ledger was never yours to take." A shot rang out, shattering the silence. The cloaked figure stumbled, clutching their arm, and fled into the night. Jap sprang forward, tackling the masked figure, who struggled, but was quickly subdued. Poirot rushed to the table, securing the package, a bundle of letters, and a small dagger, etched with the same circle and line symbol. The masked figure was unmasked, as Victor Hale, his face pale with defiance. "I'm not the broker," he spat. "I was trying to stop them." "Then who shot you at?" Jap demanded, cuffing him. Victor's eyes darted to the chapel door. "Clara, she's been playing us all." Poirot's mind whirled. Clara, the ambitious niece, had been slippery, her alibis weak, her gloves stained with toxin. But was she the broker, or another pawn? He examined the letters and the package correspondence between the broker and an unknown ally, detailing plans to eliminate Eleanor and seize control of the Blackthorn fortune. One letter mentioned a final reckoning at the chapel. Confirming Poirot's suspicions, they returned to the manor, where Clara was found tending to a superficial wound on her arm, claiming she'd been attacked by an intruder. Poirot confronted her, presenting the stained gloves and the chapel letters. "Mademoiselle, your lies unravel. You were at the chapel, meeting with Victor." "Why?" Clara's composure cracked. "I was trying to protect the family. Victor's been digging into our past, threatening to expose everything. I only wanted the ledger to keep it safe. And the toxin on your gloves," Poirot pressed. "Planted," she cried. "Someone's framing me." Poirot stepped back, his mind racing. Clara's desperation seemed genuine, but her story was riddled with holes. Victor, too, denied being the broker, insisting he was a journalist chasing a story. Yet the ledger, the symbol, the chapel meeting all pointed to a deeper truth. As dawn approached, Poirot gathered his thoughts. The chapel stakeout had yielded answers but raised new questions. Grayson's blackmail, Tom's theft, Clara's wound, Victor's pistol. The threads were converging, but the broker remained a phantom. Poirot resolved to stage a final confrontation at the chapel, using the ledger as bait. He was satisfied that he was closing in, but the game was far from over. The morning light bathed Blackthorn Manor in a golden haze. But to Poirot, it was a battlefield, each guest a potential foe. He prepared for the chapel, knowing the final reckoning would test his intellect and courage. The broker was near. He could feel its hand. He would not rest until the web of betrayal was torn apart. Chapter 8. The Chapel Confession. The dawn light crept through the stained glass windows of Blackthorn Manor's chapel, casting fractured colors across the stone floor. The air was heavy with the scent of old wood and wax, the pews arranged in neat rows that led to a modest altar adorned with a single silver cross. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the aisle, his small, precise frame silhouetted against the kaleidoscope of light. His mustache twitched as he surveyed the gathered guests, each seated with varying degrees of unease. The events of the past days, the poisonings, the locked room, the stolen necklace, and the ledger's secrets had woven a web of suspicion that now tightened around them all. Poirot's gray eyes gleamed with purpose. He was ready to unravel the threads. Eleanor Blackthorn sat in the front pew, her posture rigid, her face a mask of aristocratic composure. Her black velvet dress absorbed the light, making her appear almost spectral. Beside her, Reginald slouched, his eyes darting nervously, his fingers twisting the cuff of his shirt. Clara, in a high-necked gown of emerald green, sat 2 pews back, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed on the floor. Victor Hale, the journalist, leaned against a pillar near the back, his notebook absent for once, his expression unreadable. Mr. Grayson, the solicitor, fidgeted in his seat, his spectacles slipping down his nose as he mopped his brow with a handkerchief. The groundskeeper, Tom Wells, was absent. Still recovering from the gunshot wound Poirot had saved him from the previous night. Inspector Japp stood near the chapel door, his burly frame blocking the exit, his arms crossed as he watched the scene unfold. Poirot cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the silence. "Madame et messieurs," he began, his voice steady and deliberate, "we are gathered here in this sacred place to confront the truth. The events at Blackthorn Manor have been, how you say, a tapestry of deceit, woven with threads of greed, betrayal, and fear. But Hercule Poirot does not permit such threads to remain tangled. Nan, I shall cut them, one by one, until the pattern is clear." Eleanor's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Reginald shifted, his jaw clenching. Clara's eyes flicked up to meet Poirot's, then dropped again. Victor's mouth twitched, as if suppressing a smile. Grayson's handkerchief trembled in his hand. Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking against the stone. "Let us begin with the ledger," he said, holding up the leather-bound book he had retrieved from Eleanor's study. Its weight seemed to anchor the room's tension. "This document, it is the heart of the mystery, n'est-ce pas? It contains secrets of illegal dealings, of a shipping empire built not only on trade, but on crime. And at its core lies the figure known as the broker shadow who pulls the strings of this manor's misfortune. He paused, letting the words settle. But before we speak of the broker, we must address the acts that have brought us here. The poisoning of the maid Marie, with a rare toxin from Lady Eleanor's collection. The attack on Monsieur Reginald, locked in his room, struck by a dart carrying the same poison. The theft of the emerald necklace, the discovery of the ledger. And now, the shooting of Tom Wells, who claims he was silenced for knowing too much. These are not random acts. They are the moves of a chess game, played by a mind most cunning. Eleanor raised her chin. Monsieur Poirot, you speak with such certainty. But what proof do you have? These accusations are nothing but theatrics. Poirot's eyes narrowed, but his smile was polite. Theatrics, madame. Nan, I deal in facts, and the facts, they speak loudly. Let us start with Monsieur Grayson. He turned to the solicitor, who froze, his handkerchief dropping to the pew. You, monsieur, have admitted to being blackmailed. Your gambling debts, they made you vulnerable, did they not? You were coerced into spying on Lady Eleanor, into delivering messages to a shadowy figure at the abandoned mill. A package, perhaps, containing secrets from the ledger. Grayson's face paled. I had no choice, Monsieur Poirot. They threatened to ruin me, to expose my debts. I never meant harm to anyone. And yet Poirot said, raising a finger, you carried out their orders. You delivered a package, and at the mill, we found a burned fragment of a letter, speaking of a final reckoning at dawn. Who was this figure you met, Monsieur Grayson? Who is the broker? Grayson shook his head, his voice a whisper. I don't know. They never showed their face. I received instructions through notes, slipped under my door. I swear, I don't know who they are. Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but his eyes gleamed with calculation. Very well. We shall return to you, monsieur. But now, let us consider Monsieur Reginald. He turned to Eleanor's son, who straightened, his face a mix of defiance and fear. You, monsieur, have admitted to forging documents to secure your inheritance. You feared your mother would disinherit you, did you not? Your disdain for her wealth, it is no secret. But was it disdain or desperation? Reginald's voice was sharp. I've told you, Poirot, I forged those papers to protect what's rightfully mine. Mother's been reckless, throwing money at charities, at strangers. I had to act, but I didn't poison anyone, and I certainly didn't shoot that groundskeeper. Poirot tilted his head. Perhaps not. But your actions, they muddy the waters. You wished to control the estate, to secure your future. And the ledger, did you know of its contents? Did you seek to use it, perhaps, to bargain with the broker? Reginald's eyes widened. I didn't know about the ledger until you found it. I swear, I had nothing to do with that. Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. We shall see, monsieur. For now, let us turn to Mademoiselle Clara. He faced the niece, whose hands tightened in her lap. You, mademoiselle, have been most elusive. Your late-night walks, your secret notes to Monsieur Victor, your interest in the ledger all suggest a deeper involvement. And then, there are the gloves, stained with the same toxin used on Marie. You claim you were framed, but by whom? Clara's voice was steady, but her eyes burned. I told you, Poirot, it was Victor. He's been sniffing around this family for weeks, digging into our past. He's the one who wanted the ledger, not me. I was trying to protect Aunt Eleanor, to keep our family's secret safe. Victor snorted from the back, drawing all eyes. That's rich, Clara. You're the one who slipped me that note at the ball, begging me to meet you in the garden. You wanted to sell me the ledger's secrets for a cut of my story's profits. Clara shot to her feet. That's a lie. I never enough. Poirot's voice cut through the argument, sharp as a blade. Mademoiselle Clara, Monsieur Victor, your accusations, they are like the wind loud, but without substance. Until proven. Let us examine the evidence. The note you passed, mademoiselle, spoke of a stolen ledger. The conversation I overheard in the garden confirmed your interest in it. But was it to protect, or to profit? Clara sank back into her seat, her face pale. I wanted to know what was in it. Aunt Eleanor's been acting strangely, hiding things. I thought the ledger might explain why. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. And you, Monsieur Victor? He continued, turning to the journalist. Your forged passport, your relentless questions about the Blackthorn fortune, they paint a picture of a man with motives most impure. Are you, perhaps, the broker, seeking to expose or exploit the family's secrets for your own gain? Victor's smile was tight. I'm a journalist, Poirot. I chase stories, not shadows. Yes, I used a false name to get close to this family there. Not exactly open to the press, but I'm not the broker. I'm after the truth, nothing more. The truth, Poirot mused, is a slippery thing. And yet, we are close to grasping it. He turned to Eleanor, who had remained silent, her eyes fixed on him. Lady Eleanor, you have been the target of these schemes, or so it seems. The poison meant for you, the tampered chandelier, the theft of your necklace. But I wonder, madame, if you are not the spider at the center of this web, rather than the fly caught within it. The room went still. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, but her voice was calm. That is a bold accusation, Monsieur Poirot. I am the victim here, threatened. In my own home, you have no evidence to suggest otherwise. Poirot's smile was faint. Evidence, madame, is what I seek, and I have found it. Let us consider the ledger once more. Its coded entries, they speak of shipments, of deals with a London crime syndicate. But the most curious thing, madame, is the handwriting. It matches. The notes sent to Monsieur Grayson, the notes that instructed him to spy, to deliver packages. And those notes, they bear a striking resemblance to your own hand. Eleanor's composure faltered, her fingers tightening on the pew. That is absurd. Anyone could mimic my writing. Perhaps, Poirot said, but not anyone could know the details of the ledger's hiding place, or the precise toxin used, in your collection. And then, there is the matter of Tom Wells. He turned to the group, his voice rising. The groundskeeper shot to silence him, but saved by my quick action. He spoke of an anonymous employer, one who knew of the ledger, and the burned letter at the mill, mentioning a final reckoning. It was addressed to you, madame, was it not? Eleanor stood, her voice icy. This is outrageous. You accuse me without proof, based on fragments and guesses. I demand you retract these claims. Poirot raised a hand, undeterred. Patience, madame. The proof, it comes. But first, a revelation. He turned to Clara, who flinched under his gaze. Mademoiselle Clara, you have confessed to working with the broker years ago, but you claim you left that life behind. Yet you hide something still. Tell me, what is it you feared to reveal? Clara's hands trembled, and she looked at Eleanor, then away. I didn't want to say it, but Aunt Eleanor knew about my past. She used it against me, threatened to expose me if I didn't help her. She's not what she seems, Poirot. She's been manipulating us all. The chapel erupted in gasps. Reginald stood, his face red. Clara, how dare you? Mother would never silence. Poirot's voice was a whip-crack. Mademoiselle Clara speaks the truth, I believe. But not the whole truth. Let us return to the moment of the gunshot last night. He paced again, his hands clasped behind his back. Tom Wells was wounded outside this very chapel, claiming he was silenced for knowing too much. But what did he know? He knew of the ledger, yes, but also of the one who hired him. And that one, Mies Amos, is among us. He stopped, facing the group. The broker is no outsider. The broker is here, in this room, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall name them. He paused, letting the tension build, his eyes scanning each face. But first, a demonstration. He reached into his pocket and produced a small vial, identical to the one found in Marie's hand. This, he said, holding it aloft, is the toxin used to poison the maid, and later, Monsieur Reginald. It is rare, found only in Lady Eleanor's collection. But how did it come to be in the maid's hand? A mistake, perhaps, or a deliberate act to cast suspicion elsewhere. He turned to Eleanor, his voice soft but piercing. Madame, you have orchestrated this chaos to protect your empire. The poisonings, the theft, the ledger, they are your moves, designed to eliminate threats and maintain control. You are the broker. The chapel was silent, the air thick with shock. Eleanor's face was a mask, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. You have no proof, she said, her voice low. This is madness. Poirot shook his head. Non, madame. It is clarity. The ledger's codes, they were written by you. The notes to Grayson, in your hand. The toxin, from your collection. And Tom Wellesley was your pawn, paid to steal the necklace as a distraction, then shot to ensure his silence. But you did not count on Hercule Poirot. Eleanor laughed, a brittle sound. You weave a fine story, monsieur, but it is fiction. Where is your evidence? Poirot reached into his coat and produced a folded paper. This, he said, unfolding it, is a letter, recovered from the mill, unburned. It is addressed to you, madame, in your own code, detailing the final shipment of your syndicate's goods. And it is signed by the broker. Your signature, madame. Eleanor's face drained of color. The room seemed to hold its breath. Reginald sank into his seat, his hands covering his face. Clara stared at her aunt, her expression a mix of betrayal and relief. Victor's eyes narrowed, as if calculating his next move. Grayson's handkerchief fell to the floor. You cannot prove it, Eleanor said, her voice trembling now. You cannot, but I can, Poirot said, stepping closer. And I have. Inspector Japp, if you please. Japp moved forward, his handcuffs glinting in the light. Lady Eleanor Blackthorne, you're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted murder, and fraud. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Eleanor stood, her posture defiant, even as Japp approached. You think you've won, Poirot, she hissed. This manor, this family, they are mine. You cannot take that from me. Smile was sad. Madame, it is not I who take it. It is the truth. As Japp led Eleanor from the chapel, the guests sat in stunned silence. Reginald's shoulders shook, and Clara reached for his hand, her own trembling. Victor slipped out, his notebook in hand, already scribbling. Grayson stared at the floor, as if wishing to disappear. Poirot turned to the remaining guests. The web is unraveled, Mies Amos, but the scars remain. Mademoiselle Clara, you must decide what to do with this truth. Monsieur Reginald, you must find your own path. The manor is yours now, but its legacy, its honor, that is for you to rebuild. He adjusted his hat, his expression calm. As for me, I am satisfied. The puzzle is solved, the guilty exposed. Hercule Poirot does not fail. The chapel doors swung open, and the morning light poured in, illuminating the path ahead. The case was not yet closed. There were details to confirm, statements to take, but the heart of the mystery was laid bare. Poirot stepped into the light, his mind already turning to the next challenge. His heart content with the justice served. The chapel fell silent, the echoes of confession fading into the stone. Chapter 9. The broker unmasked. The air in Blackthorn Manor was thick with suspicion, a palpable weight that seemed to cling to the ancient stone walls and seep into the very floorboards. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand library, his small, precise figure a stark contrast to the towering shelves of leather-bound books that surrounded him. His mustache twitched slightly as he surveyed the room, his sharp gray eyes darting from one object to another. Crystal decanter on a side table, a half-burned candle, a misplaced cushion. Each detail, no matter how small, was a potential thread in the intricate web of betrayal he had been unraveling since his arrival at this cursed estate. The ledger, now safely locked in a hidden compartment of his suitcase, had revealed much, but not all. Its coded entries, painstakingly deciphered over sleepless nights, pointed to a shadowy figure known only as the broker, a mastermind who had orchestrated illegal dealings through the late Lord Blackthorn's shipping empire. The ledger's secrets were a map of greed, power, and deception, but the final piece, the identity of the broker, remained just out of reach. Poirot had narrowed his suspects to a handful: Reginald, Clara, Victor, and even the nervous solicitor Grayson, but he knew the truth lay closer than any of them suspected. The events of the past days, the poisoned maid, the locked room, the stolen necklace, the tempered chandelier, were not random acts, but deliberate moves in a game of cat and mouse. and Poirot, with his methodical mind, was determined to be. The cat. The morning sun filtered through the library's stained-glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the Persian rug. Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes silent against the plush fabric. He had spent the previous night planting a subtle but irresistible seed, a rumor, whispered to Clara during a seemingly casual conversation, that he had fully decoded the ledger and would reveal its secrets at midnight. The bait was set, and now he waited, confident that the broker, whoever they were, would not resist the urge to act. The ledger was the key to their empire, and its exposure would mean ruin. Poirot's trap was simple, yet elegant, a false ledger, meticulously crafted to mimic the original, placed in Eleanor's study, where it could be found. The real ledger remained with him, its secrets guarded, as the clock on the mantelpiece ticked toward noon. Poirot heard footsteps in the hall. He turned, his posture relaxed, but his mind razor-sharp, as Clara entered the room. Her auburn hair was swept into a loose bun, and her green eyes flickered with a mix of defiance and unease. She wore a simple gray dress, but the way her fingers twisted the hem betrayed her nerves. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in her posture. "You wanted to see me?" "Oui, Mademoiselle Clara," Poirot replied, his tone smooth as velvet. "I wished to discuss a matter of some delicacy. The ledger, you see, has revealed certain truths about your family's affairs. I believe you know more than you have shared." Clara's lips parted, but she quickly recovered, forcing a smile. "I've told you everything, monsieur. I wanted the ledger to protect my inheritance, nothing more. Surely you don't suspect me of these dreadful acts?" Poirot tilted his head, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Suspect? Nan, mademoiselle, I do not suspect. I observe. And what I observe is a young woman who walks the gardens at midnight, who passes notes to journalists, who knows more of her uncle's business than she admits. Tell me, what is it you fear? The truth, or its consequences?" Clara's face paled, but she held his gaze. "You're mistaken, monsieur. I'm no criminal. I only wanted to protect what's mine." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his voice soft but unyielding. "But the ledger speaks of the broker, a figure who controls much more than an inheritance. And I believe the broker is here, among us, watching, waiting. Tonight, I shall reveal their name." Clara's breath hitched, and for a moment, Poirot thought she might confess. But she merely nodded, her expression unreadable, and excused herself. As she left, Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. The seed had taken root. The day passed in a blur of calculated moves. Poirot met with each guest, dropping hints about the ledger's revelations, while watching their reactions. Reginald, sullen and withdrawn, muttered about his mother's unfair treatment, but avoided Poirot's probing questions. Victor Hale, the journalist, was all charm and deflection, claiming his interest in the Blackthorn fortune was purely professional. Grayson, the solicitor, was a nervous wreck, his hands trembling as he denied any knowledge of the syndicate. Each interaction was a brushstroke on Poirot's mental canvas, painting a clearer picture of the deception at play. By evening, the manor buzzed with anticipation. The guests gathered in the dining hall for supper, their faces a gallery of forced smiles and guarded glances. Eleanor Blackthorn presided at the head of the table, her silver hair gleaming under the chandelier's light. She wore a deep burgundy gown, her demeanor regal but strained, as if she sensed the storm gathering around her. Poirot, seated to her right, observed her closely. Her fingers, adorned with heavy rings, toyed with her wineglass, and her eyes darted to the door whenever a servant entered. Was it fear, or something else? The meal was interrupted by a sharp knock at the front door. Inspector Japp, summoned by Poirot earlier that day, strode into the hall, his weathered face set in a grim line. His presence sent a ripple of unease through the guests, and Poirot noted the way Eleanor's hand tightened around her glass. "Monsieur Poirot," Japp said, his voice low but carrying, "I've got news from London. The syndicate you mentioned, there's been a break. We've traced a shipment to a dock near here, and it's tied to someone in this house." A murmur ran through the room. Clara's fork clattered to her plate, and Reginald's face darkened. Victor leaned forward, his journalist's instincts piqued, while Grayson shrank into his chair. Eleanor, however, remained composed, her smile thin and cold. "Thank you, Inspector," Poirot said, rising from his seat. "This is most fortuitous. Tonight, Mies, Amos, we shall unmask the broker. But first, I must ask you all to join me in the study at midnight. There, the ledger's secrets will be laid bare." The announcement hung in the air like a blade. Poirot excused himself, leaving the guests to their whispered speculations, and retired to his room to prepare. He checked the false ledger, ensuring every detail was perfect, and placed it in Eleanor's study, hidden just enough to tempt a desperate hand. The real ledger remained with him, tucked inside his coat. He then positioned himself in a shadowed alcove near the study, where he could watch without being seen. The hours crept by, each tick of the clock a heartbeat in the silent manner. At 11:30, Poirot heard soft footsteps in the hall. He pressed himself deeper into the shadows, his eyes fixed on the study door. A figure appeared, cloaked in a dark shawl, moving with the stealth of a predator. The door creaked open, and the figure slipped inside. Poirot waited, counting the seconds, until he heard the faint rustle of paper, the false ledger being opened. He stepped into the study, his voice cutting through the darkness. "Bonsoir, Madame Blackthorne, or should I say, the broker, Eleanor." Blackthorne froze, her hands clutching the false ledger. The shawl slipped from her shoulders, revealing her pale face, her eyes wide with shock but quickly narrowing into defiance. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady, despite the circumstances, "you are mistaken. I am merely protecting my family's legacy." Poirot shook his head, his expression one of pity rather than triumph. "Non, madame, you are protecting your empire. The ledger, the poisonings, the stolen necklace, all were your design. You invited me here not to solve a mystery, but to distract from one. You thought Hercule Poirot could be manipulated, but you underestimated the power of the little gray cells." Eleanor's lips curled into a sneer. "You have no proof, monsieur. This ledger is a fake, and you know it." "Indeed," Poirot said, producing the real ledger from his coat. "This is the true ledger, and its codes have revealed your dealings with the syndicate, the shipments, the bribes, the threats, all orchestrated by you. The maid's poisoning was a test to flush out disloyalty. Reginald's attack was a warning to keep him in line, and the necklace, a diversion to cast suspicion elsewhere." Eleanor's composure cracked, her hands trembling as she set the false ledger down. "You don't understand, Poirot. My husband left me with nothing but debts and enemies. I had to rebuild, to survive. The broker was my creation, my shield. And your curse," Poirot said softly. "You framed Clara, used Victor as a scapegoat, and blackmailed Grayson. But you could not outrun the truth. The coded letters to the broker, they were addressed to you, a clever ruse to maintain your double life." Eleanor's eyes blazed with fury, but her shoulders sagged as the fight drained from her. "What now, Poirot? Will you destroy me?" "Non, Madame," Poirot replied. "You have destroyed yourself. Inspector Japp waits outside, and the evidence is complete. But I offer you one chance to confess, to spare your family further shame." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Eleanor laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You think you've won, don't you? Very well, Poirot. I am the broker. I poisoned the maid to test her loyalty. I drugged Reginald to keep him silent. I orchestrated everything to protect what I built. But you'll never understand the cost." Before Poirot could respond, she lunged for a decanter on the desk, raising it as if to strike. Poirot, ever nimble, stepped aside, and the decanter shattered against the wall. The noise brought Japp and his men rushing into the room, their lanterns casting stark shadows across Eleanor's defeated form. "Lady Blackthorne," Japp said, his voice heavy with authority, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted murder, and fraud." Eleanor straightened, her dignity returning, even as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "You may take me, Inspector, but the Blackthorne name will endure." Poirot watched as she was led away, her head held high despite her ruin. He felt no triumph, only a quiet satisfaction that justice had been served. The web of betrayal had been intricate, but his little grey cells had unraveled it. Thread by thread, as the study emptied, Poirot lingered, his gaze falling on the false ledger. He had taken a bold risk, trusting his instincts to lure the broker into the open, and it had paid off. The manor, once a stage for deception, would now know peace at least for a time. He tucked the real ledger under his arm and stepped into the hall, ready to face the remaining guests and close the case. The midnight confrontation had been the climax, but Poirot's work was not yet done. He gathered the guests in the drawing room, where the fire crackled softly, casting flickering light on their anxious faces. Clara sat rigid, her hands clasped tightly. Reginald stared into the flames, his expression a mix of guilt and relief. Victor scribbled notes, his journalist's instinct undeterred by the night's events. Grayson, pale and trembling, clutched a glass of brandy. Mise Amas Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding. The mystery of Blackthorn Manor is solved. The broker, the architect of this web of betrayal, was none other than Lady Eleanor Blackthorn. A collective gasp filled the room. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, and Reginald's head snapped up, his eyes wide with disbelief. Victor's pen froze, and Grayson's glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. "Impossible," Reginald stammered. "My mother, a criminal." "Oui, Monsieur Poirot," said. "She built an empire on deceit, using the ledger to control her dealings with a London syndicate. The poisonings, the thefts, the threats all were her doing, designed to protect her secret and eliminate any who threatened it." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "But why invite you here, Monsieur Poirot? Why risk exposure?" "A clever mind often seeks to outwit itself," Poirot replied. "Madame Blackthorn believed she could control the narrative, using me as a pawn to deflect suspicion. But she did not anticipate the precision of Hercule Poirot." Victor leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "This is incredible, Poirot. The story of the century." "You may write your story, Monsieur Hale," Poirot interrupted, his tone firm, "but you will do so with restraint. The Blackthorn family has suffered enough. Let the truth be told, but let it not destroy what remains of their honor." Victor nodded, chastened but still eager. Poirot turned to Clara, his expression softening. "Mademoiselle, the estate is yours now. Use it wisely, and perhaps you can restore what your aunt sought to destroy." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "I will, monsieur. I swear it." To Reginald, Poirot said, "Monsieur, you have made mistakes, but redemption is within your reach. Seek it, and you may yet honor your family's name." Reginald said nothing, but his shoulders squared, as if a burden had been lifted. Grayson, still shaken, muttered an apology, which Poirot acknowledged with a nod as the guests dispersed. Poirot stepped onto the terrace, the cool night air, a balm after the stifling tension of the manor. Inspector Japp joined him, lighting a cigarette and exhaling a plume of smoke into the starry sky. "You've done it again." "Poirot," Japp said, a grudging admiration in his voice. "I thought we'd never catch the broker." "How'd you know it was her?" "The little grey cells, mon ami," Poirot said, tapping his temple. "They see what others miss. The clues were there, the self-addressed letters, the precise timing of the poisonings, the way Madame Blackthorn controlled every detail of this house. She was too perfect, too composed. Only a mastermind could maintain such a facade." Japp chuckled. "You're a marvel, Poirot. What's next?" "Back to London." "Oui," Poirot said, his gaze distant. "But first, I shall walk the gardens. At dawn, there is something peaceful about a case resolved, Nan." Japp clapped him on the shoulder and left him to his thoughts. Poirot stood alone, the manor's silhouette looming behind him. The web of betrayal had been dismantled, its threads cut by his relentless pursuit of truth. Yet, as he looked out over the darkened estate, he felt a pang of melancholy. Eleanor Blackthorn had been a formidable adversary, her brilliance matched only by her ambition. Her fall was a tragedy, but a necessary one. The stars glittered above, indifferent to the drama below. Poirot adjusted his coat, his mind already turning to the next challenge. For now, though, he was content. The case was closed, the truth revealed, and Blackthorn Manor could begin to heal. Hercule Poirot, with his bold risk and unshakable instincts, had triumphed once more. Chapter 10. The Manors. Silence. The dawn broke over Blackthorn Manor, with a quiet that felt almost unnatural. As if the estate itself exhaled in relief after the storm of deception had passed. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the Manors. Sprawling gardens, his polished shoes damp with morning dew, his grey cells humming with the satisfaction of a case resolved. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of roses and the distant temps of the Devon Sea. The manor, with its ivy-clad towers and weathered stone, loomed behind him, no longer a labyrinth of secrets but a silent witness to the unraveling of Eleanor Blackthorn's intricate web of betrayal. Poirot adjusted his hat, his mustache twitching, as he contemplated the fragility of human trust and the triumph of truth. The case was closed, but the echoes of its revelations lingered, demanding reflection. As Poirot walked the gravel path, his mind retraced the threads of the investigation. Eleanor's arrest the previous night had been swift, almost anticlimactic after the dizzying dance of clues and motives. Inspector Japp, ever reliable, had arrived with his men under the cover of darkness, their boots crunching on the drive. As they escorted a defiant Eleanor to the waiting police car, her face, once regal and commanding, had hardened into a mask of defiance, her eyes glinting with the cold calculation of the broker. She had offered Poirot a bribe, some that could have secured a lifetime of luxury, but he had merely smiled, his refusal unspoken but absolute. The ledger, the true one safely hidden in Poirot's valise, was now in Japp's custody, its coded secrets poised to dismantle the remnants of Eleanor's criminal empire. Poirot paused by a stone fountain, its water trickling softly, and considered the ledger's role. Its pages, filled with cryptic notations, had been the key to unmasking Eleanor. The coded entries, which he had deciphered with painstaking care, revealed shipments tied to a London syndicate. But more crucially, they exposed Eleanor's dual identity. The broker was not a shadowy outsider, but the mistress of Blackthorn Manor herself, orchestrating her schemes under the guise of a grieving widow. The coded letters, addressed to the broker, were a clever ruse, sent to a postbox she controlled, ensuring her tracks were covered. Poirot marveled at her audacity, her ability to manipulate those around her while maintaining the facade of a benevolent matriarch. Yet, her ambition had been her undoing, her need to control every detail, leaving traces that only a mind like Poirot's could follow. The garden path led him toward the chapel, its spire cutting through the morning mist. The events of the previous night replayed in his mind, the confrontation in the chapel, where he had gathered the guests under the pretense of revealing the ledger's full code. Eleanor's composure had cracked when Poirot announced the ledger was a fake, her eyes darting to the safe where she believed the real one lay. Her attempt to destroy it, caught in the act by Poirot's watchful gaze, had sealed her fate. The other guests, Sclera, Reginald, Victor, and Grayson, had watched in stunned silence as Japp's men entered, their faces a tableau of shock, relief, and guilt. Clara's tears, Reginald's slumped shoulders, Victor's tight-lipped restraint, and Grayson's nervous fidgeting had told Poirot that each carried their own burdens. Though none matched Eleanor's treachery, Poirot's thoughts turned to Clara, now the heir to Blackthorn Manor. She had emerged from the ordeal with a quiet resolve. Her confession in the chapel, revealing her past entanglement with the broker, but also her determination to break free. She had been a pawn in Eleanor's game, her ambition to secure her inheritance twisted by her aunt's manipulations. Yet Poirot sensed in her a spark of redemption. As he passed a rosebush, its petals drooping under the weight of dew, he recalled her promise to restore the manor's honor. She had stood in the great hall after Eleanor's arrest, her voice steady as she vowed to use the estate's wealth for charitable works, to erase the stain of her family's criminal past. Poirot believed her, though he knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. The manor's legacy was a heavy burden, but Clara's youth and sincerity gave him hope. Reginald, too, had surprised Poirot, the aloof son, so consumed by resentment toward his mother's wealth, had crumbled in the chapel, admitting to forging documents to secure his inheritance. His fear of disfavor, stoked by Eleanor's subtle cruelties, had driven him to desperation. Yet, in the aftermath, he had sought Poirot out, his face pale but determined. "I want to make amends," he had said, his voice low. "I'll work with Clara, give what I have to those who need it." Poirot had nodded, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the young man's sincerity. Reginald's path to redemption would be long, but Poirot sensed a genuine desire to atone. A flicker of the honor Eleanor had never nurtured in him. Victor Hale, the journalist, had been a thorn in Poirot's side, his charm masking a relentless pursuit of the Blackthorn scandal. Yet, Poirot had to admire his tenacity. Cleared of being the broker, Victor had been released with minor charges for his forged passport, a relic of his investigative exploits. Over a quiet breakfast before Poirot's departure, Victor had shared his plans for a restrained article, one that would expose the syndicate's reach without sensationalizing the manor's downfall. "You've earned my respect, Monsieur Poirot," he had said, raising a coffee cup in salute. "I'll keep it discreet, as you asked." Poirot had inclined his head, satisfied that Victor's pen would not undo the delicate balance of justice achieved. Grayson, the solicitor, remained a figure of pity. His gambling debts had made him an easy target for Eleanor's blackmail, forcing him to spy and alter documents. In the chapel, his confession had been a flood of remorse, his hands trembling as he recounted the pressure he faced. Poirot had watched him closely, noting the genuine shame in his eyes. Grayson's career was likely ruined, but Poirot suspected he would find solace in a quieter life, perhaps in a small village far from the temptations of London. The burned letter fragment from the mill, mentioning a final reckoning, had been Grayson's last act of obedience to Eleanor's shadow, a futile attempt to cover her tracks. Poirot had spared him further interrogation. Content that Grayson's role was minor in the grand scheme. The groundskeeper, Tom Wells, had survived his wounds, thanks to Poirot's quick thinking with the tourniquet. His testimony had been crucial, revealing the anonymous figure who paid him to steal the emerald necklace. Poirot suspected the figure was one of Eleanor's syndicate contacts, now scattered to the winds as Japp's investigation tightened. Tom's recovery in a local hospital gave Poirot a quiet satisfaction, a reminder that even the smallest players in this drama deserved a chance at redemption. The Manor's staff, shaken but loyal, had begun to rally around Clara, their whispers of gratitude reaching Poirot as he packed his valise. The maid, fully recovered from her poisoning, had even pressed a small bouquet of wildflowers into his hands, her eyes brimming with thanks. Poirot's steps slowed as he reached the Manor's wrought iron gates, the morning sun casting long shadows across the drive. He turned to take in the estate one last time, its grandeur softened by the light. The case had been a bold risk, a gamble on his instincts that the truth lay not in the obvious clues to poison. The ledger, the locked room butt, and the human frailties behind them. Eleanor's betrayal had been a masterpiece of deception, a web spun with precision and cruelty. Yet Poirot's methodical mind had unraveled it, thread by thread, exposing the heart of her empire. He felt no triumph, only a quiet satisfaction, the kind that came from restoring order to chaos. As he waited for the car to take him to the station, Poirot's thoughts drifted to Inspector Japp. Their partnership, forged over years of cases, had been instrumental here. Japp's resources had traced the syndicate's connections, his men ensuring Eleanor's arrest was smooth. Poirot smiled, imagining Japp's gruff approval when the ledger's evidence led to further arrests. The syndicate, weakened by Eleanor's exposure, would not recover easily. Poirot's role was done, but Japp's work would continue, a thought that pleased him as he adjusted his gloves. The car arrived, its engine rumbling softly, and Poirot stepped inside, settling into the leather seat. The driver, a local man with a weathered face, tipped his cap. "To the station, sir?" he asked. Poirot nodded, his eyes lingering on the Manor as it receded into the distance. The journey to London awaited, a return to the bustle of the city and the comfort of his apartment. He would write his report, a meticulous account of the case, and perhaps enjoy a tisane by the fire, reflecting on the intricacies of human nature. The road wound through the Devon countryside, its hills rolling under a sky streaked with clouds. Poirot's mind, ever active, replayed the case's pivotal moments. The maids, poisoning a misstep meant for Eleanor. The locked room, a clever distraction solved by the dart's trajectory. The masquerade ball, where masks hid more than faces. And the ledger, the silent witness to Eleanor's crimes. Each clue had been a piece of a puzzle, fitting together only when viewed through the lens of Poirot's logic. He had trusted his instincts, a bold risk in a game where every guest was a potential adversary. And that trust had led him to the truth. Clara's face lingered in his thoughts. Her determination, a contrast to Eleanor's cold ambition. Poirot hoped she would succeed, that Blackthorn Manor would become a place of healing rather than secrets. He thought, too, of Reginald, Clara's face lingered in his thoughts, her determination a contrast to Eleanor's cold ambition. Poirot hoped she would succeed, that Blackthorn Manor would become a place of healing rather than secrets. He thought, too, of Reginald, his redemption, a fragile but possible dream. Victor's article, when published, would stir whispers in London's salons. But Poirot trusted its restraint would protect the innocent. Grayson and Tom, minor players in the drama, would fade into obscurity, their lives altered but not destroyed. And Eleanor, the mastermind, would face justice. Her empire reduced to a cautionary tale. The car slowed as the station came into view, its platform bustling with travelers. Poirot stepped out, his valise in hand, and thanked the driver with a courteous nod. The train to London was due soon, its whistle already faint in the distance. Poirot stood on the platform, his posture impeccable, his mind at ease. The case of Blackthorn Manor was closed, its web of betrayal unraveled. He had taken a bold risk, trusting his instincts against a formidable foe, and justice had prevailed. As the train approached, Poirot allowed himself a final reflection. The Manor's silence was not just the absence of sound, but the presence of truth, hard-won and unyielding. He boarded the train, settling into a window seat, and watched the Devon landscape blur past. London awaited, with its mysteries and challenges, but for now, Poirot was content. The case was solved, the guilty punished, and the innocent given a chance to rebuild. He closed his eyes, the rhythm of the train lulling him, and smiled. The little gray cells had triumphed once more. The journey passed in a haze of green fields and distant hills. The train's steady clatter, a soothing counterpoint to Poirot's thoughts. He considered the broader implications of the case. The way Eleanor's syndicate had reached into the heart of Devon, corrupting even a place as secluded as Blackthorn Manor. The ledger's evidence would keep Japp busy for months, tracing connections to London, perhaps even abroad. Poirot wondered briefly if he would be called upon again, but dismissed the thought. His role was complete, the stage cleared for others to act, in his mind's eye. He saw the Manor's great hall, its chandeliers gleaming, its portraits watching. The guests, each with their secrets, had been a microcosm of humanity greed, fear, ambition, and redemption woven into a single night. Poirot had navigated their motives with precision, his questions cutting through lies like a scalpel. He recalled Clara's trembling hands as she confessed, Reginald's bowed head, Victor's guarded eyes, Grayson's stammered apologies, and Eleanor's final, defiant glare. Each had played their part, and Poirot had directed the drama to its inevitable conclusion. The train slowed as it approached London, the city's skyline emerging through the haze. Poirot straightened, adjusting his tie, ready to return to his ordered life. His apartment, with its neat shelves and polished surfaces, awaited, a haven from the chaos of human nature. He would write to Hastings, perhaps, sharing a sanitized version of the case, or enjoy a quiet evening with a book and a glass of sirop de cassis. The thought brought a small smile to his lips as he stepped onto the platform. The bustle of London enveloped him. Vendors calling, taxis honking, the pulse of a city alive with possibility. Poirot walked with purpose, his valise swinging lightly, his mind already turning to the next challenge. Blackthorn Manor was behind him, its silence a testament to his skill. The web of betrayal had been dismantled, its threads scattered to the wind. Hercule Poirot, detective extraordinaire, had taken a bold risk and emerged victorious, ready for whatever mystery awaited in the shadows of London. The station clock struck noon, its chimes echoing over the platform. Poirot glanced at it, then at the sky, where clouds parted to reveal a sliver of blue. He tipped his hat to no one in particular, a gesture of satisfaction, and walked into the city, his silhouette sharp against the crowd. The case was closed, the manor silent, and Poirot's work, for now, was done.